Chapter 245. A faint light flickered, and Chi Yu's eyes shone with a tyrannical light. The energy that Lung Er had injected into his body was very special, as though she had injected a vacuum. Although most of it had been neutralized, there was still about 10% of it that had invaded his meridians. The moment that vacuum-like energy entered Chi Yu's body, it did not immediately begin to destroy him. Instead, it frantically absorbed his own energy. Feeling the change in this energy, Chi Yu could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He understood that if he allowed this vacuum-like energy to absorb enough of his energy, then the next thing that would happen would be an explosion. If such a huge amount of energy exploded in his body, the destructive effect would be self-evident, and it was something that Chi Yu could not withstand. Fortunately, he had already neutralized most of the attack, and the moment he felt that something was wrong, he immediately used the energy of the Xianyuan sword in his body to directly destroy the vacuum. However, in that instant, the energy advantage that Chi Yu had obtained through trickery was completely gone. Floating in midair, Chi Yu turned around to look at Lung Er, and could not help but say, "Didn't you also use trickery? And you were talking about me just now." Lung Er looked at Chi Yu in midair, and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Was this a battle of life and death? Why did it feel like the two of them were a couple exchanging pointers? There was no tension at all, and instead, it was very relaxed. With her hands on her hips, she glared at Chi Yu. "What do you mean by trickery? This is called strength, all right?" Chi Yu laughed. "Yes, to you, it's called strength, to me, it's called trickery. All right." Lung Er floated up, and in the blink of an eye, she was already in front of Chi Yu. "What are you laughing at? I'm going to kill you. Have you forgotten?" Chi Yu smiled bitterly. "How could I forget? I'm not an idiot. If you want to kill me, then kill me. But I can't guarantee that I won't run away." Lung Er's long-lost hooligan habits resurfaced, and her angry look was so cute no matter how one looked at it. Looking at Chi Yu, Lung Er knew. If this continued, she would not be able to make up her mind to destroy Chi Yu. This hateful fellow had actually caused the killing intent that she had painstakingly gathered to dissipate. Was she going to let him go just like that? No, she could not. At this moment, Lung Er could not help but remember what her father had said. The pink light in her beautiful eyes became stronger again. She shouted in a low voice, and pink light shone from her hands at the same time. It was no longer the pink ribbons from before, but two pink sharp blades. "Devil kiss, one of them, 1, 1, and 1. Once you are hit by the devil's kiss, your life will be completely devoured and transferred into my body. Chi Yu, I will not be lenient." Lung Er shouted, the sharp blades in her hands already vibrating rapidly. Dozens of light figures enveloped Chi Yu's body, the huge energy light bringing a pink temptation to the dark sky. Chi Yu's heart shivered. Devil's Kiss, just hearing this name, he knew how powerful this magic tool was. Kiran's phantom transformed into a spear in her hand. Lung Er's Devil's Kiss had a very unique appearance. It was neither a saber nor a sword, but a pink handguard that covered Lung Er's hand. The blade was about a foot long, with 3 arcs that glowed with a pink light. Although Lung Er could not see the blade, the moment it appeared in her hand, she could feel a cold energy seal around her body. Clearly, it had some kind of special ability. A faint light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes, and his body quickly floated backwards. The Devil's Kiss seemed to be able to lock down ordinary weapons, so Kiran had already turned into a long red spear in his hand. As the saying goes, an inch longer, an inch stronger. Since his opponent was using a short weapon, then he would use a long weapon to restrain him. With a shake of his right hand, Kiran brought with it a wave of red light that scattered towards his opponent. At this moment, Chi Yu was completely immersed in his spear, and the energy of his attack also changed. Kiran's true fire condensed on the tip of the spear, and a dark red spear light that was about 3 inches long burst out. Although Kiran's true fire was not very strong, the 3-inch spear light was no different from a real body. The tyrannical energy brought with it a rapidly rising temperature, and it quickly collided with the Devil's Kiss in Lung Er's hand. A dense burst of energy rang out, and the battle between Chi Yu and Lung Er had begun once again. Lung Er's body was constantly flashing. Previously, when Klinsmann used teleportation, he would immediately attack after a single teleportation, but Lung Er did not do that. Her body was constantly flashing, and she did not use any footwork to speak of. However, every time she flashed, she would appear in a different position. Before Chi Yu could block, she would already appear in a different position. Every time she appeared, her posture would also be different. Most of the time, when Lung Er appeared, it was as if Chi Yu's body had voluntarily moved forward. If not for the fact that Kieran's swim was amazing enough, he would have been hit by Lung Er's continuous short-distance teleportation. Rich combat experience allowed Chi Yu to always be able to shake off his spear at the last moment, just in time to block the attack of the Devil's Kiss. He realized that the Devil's Kiss was clearly the most suitable weapon for Lung Er. This was because every time Lung Er's tyrannical strength exploded, the Devil's Kiss would come into contact with his Kieran's illusion. The suction force would suddenly increase, and with the enhancement of the Devil's Kiss, the suction force would be at least 3 times stronger than before. Under such circumstances, Chi Yu had no choice but to focus on protecting his energy. The spear in his hand danced in an airtight manner, and the area within a 3-zhang radius was filled with countless red shadows and the enormous energy of the Kieran's true fire. This prevented Lung Er from breaking through his defense in a short period of time. The effect of the Devil's Kiss was too strong. Chi Yu knew that if the battle continued like this, his consumption would definitely be much greater than Lung Er's. Even if he recovered faster than her, the battle would still enter a stalemate, which was disadvantageous to him. Lung Er was also surprised by Chi Yu's combat ability. The defense he displayed did not have any techniques to speak of, and it was all about speed. Moreover, his body coordination was excellent, and he could always swing the spear in his hand in the most dangerous moment to block the attack of the Devil's Kiss. This kind of situation made Lung Er feel a little uncomfortable. It must be known that in the process of constantly teleporting, she also consumed a certain amount of energy. On the surface, it looked like she was in a state of full attack, but she did not really have the upper hand. At this point in the battle, Lung Er was already a little impatient. Using the mental cultivation method from Hell, she forcefully suppressed her favorable impression of Chi Yu and wholeheartedly focused on the battle. The Devil's Kiss suddenly disappeared, and her figure floated back. The 2 sharp blades were exchanged in one hand. Lung Er's change immediately made Chi Yu feel his body become lighter. Seeing her like this, Chi Yu thought that Lung Er was going to say something again, so he put the spear in his hand behind his back and looked at her. However, Lung Er's next action immediately made him nervous. The 2 blades were exchanged in her left hand, and Lung Er's right hand opened up to the sky. Her palm moved slightly, and suddenly, a black stream of air appeared in the shape of a vortex in the center of her palm. The huge energy aura continued to rise, and the black stream of air was like a small tornado, constantly expanding. Chi Yu could clearly feel that the aura on Lung Er's body had changed. He knew that in a situation where she could not gain the upper hand with her moves, Lung Er had already started to use energy attacks again. Energy attacks were undoubtedly more dangerous, and the consumption was also greater. But at this moment, Chi Yu could clearly feel that the energy Lung Er used did not seem to belong to her, but was instead filled with the negative aura of heaven and earth. The huge energy became more and more terrifying, and the pink eyes had already lost all signs of life, so calm that it was a little scary. Staring fixedly at Chi Yu, the aura that had locked onto his body was like a thorn in Chi Yu's back, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Chi Yu did not move. At this moment, he knew that he could not rashly launch an attack. Lung Er's aura was completely locked onto him. As the saying goes, Pull one hair and the whole body will move, and a destructive attack would immediately come. After all, the two of them were fighting for the first time, so they were not familiar with each other. Chiyu also did not know what ability Lung-er was going to use, but at this moment, he felt a little strange, so he did not dare to be careless. Kirin returned to his body, and floated in the air. Chiyu began the second stage of Kirin's origin mutation. Now, he needed more power to give himself more opportunities to adapt. A huge light shadow of Kirin appeared, emitting a strong light. It had a black body, silver fur, and a two-colored horn on its head, all of which exuded a tyrannical aura of a king of Kirin. After the shadow of Kirin appeared, it instantly rushed to where Chiyu was, completely wrapped around him, and began to fuse with him. The black scales quickly changed, and the original single layer of scales turned into 3 layers of composite scales, layer by layer, protecting each other. The whole body suddenly swelled up, and then a pair of black Kirin wings instantly rushed out from the scales, spreading to both sides of its body. The Kirin pearl on its chest seemed to have swelled up a little, and the entire Kirin pearl had completely turned silver. On the black Kirin armor, it was particularly eye-catching. The silver halo expanded outwards like a breastplate. The Kirin armor on its shoulder also turned into 3 layers, layer by layer, extending downwards. At the same time, a circle of special-shaped scales stood up on Chiyu's neck, like the collar of a shirt, protecting his neck. The original silver patterns on Kirin's arm gradually expanded, and a completely silver picture of Kirin appeared on his right arm. The position of the picture of Kirin's head was right between his thumb and index finger, and layers of twisted light constantly surrounded Chiyu's arm, trembling slightly. The black wings formed by the condensed black scales gently flapped on its back. Covered in the Kirin armor, Chiyu's figure looked even more burly than before. The long silver hair on his head fluttered in the wind, and under the influence of his aura, he quietly floated there, waiting for Lung-er to attack him. At this moment, a strange smile suddenly appeared on Lung-er's face. Without any warning, the black tornado on her hand suddenly disappeared, and the huge energy aura that had gathered earlier disappeared in an instant, causing a feeling of a vacuum to appear in the air. Chi-Yu's aura and spiritual power were completely focused on the tornado, and when the tornado suddenly disappeared, his body could not help but tremble. Under the influence of the aura, his body uncontrollably lunged towards Lung-er, and he felt as if the energy in his body was about to be extracted. Although he forcibly controlled it, the pain at that moment made Chi-Yu roar. The thundercloud force in his body was completely disrupted by this sudden change, and all kinds of energy were no longer flowing smoothly. The energy aura in his body suddenly became complicated, as if it could change at any time. Lung-er did not move. She just stood there quietly, a strange expression on her face. Seeing Chi-Yu's figure lunging towards her, she separated her hands, and the devil's kiss in her hands merged into one. Under the cover of the pink light, a pink longsword appeared in her hands. She swung the longsword upwards, and suddenly, a pink crescent slash cut through the air. The sound of the air being torn was so ear-piercing that it not only tore through the air, but also seemed to tear through the entire space. Chi-Yu clearly felt a huge pressure on both sides of his body, squeezing his body. Although it was not to the extent that he could not move, his speed was greatly restricted. The pink crescent slash reached him in almost an instant, and the tyrannical energy undulations and the strange energy aura that was like a black hole caused him to spit out blood. At this moment, Chi-Yu knew that he could no longer hold back, or else he would end up in a miserable state. The energy in his body was in a chaotic state, and at this moment, he could not even use 50% of his strength. If he allowed Lung-er's attack to reach him, then even if he did not die, he would definitely be seriously injured. The energy in his body flowed, and Chi-Yu's body suddenly turned in midair. The black wings on his back suddenly spread open, forcibly reducing the speed of his forward flight by more than half, causing his body to stop for a moment. At the same time, a silver light shone, followed by a surging golden light. The golden light flashed, using its own energy. Updated by Tao Taro, with the help of the energy that Chi Yu barely gathered, it brought along a golden light and met the pink crescent head-on. The energy of the Devil's Kiss was extremely terrifying. Once it encountered an energy collision, it would first devour as much energy as possible in an instant, and then break through it. It also had the support of Hell's Princess Ling'er's energy, so it could naturally display a greater effect. However, there was still a limit to its devouring ability. When the pink energy met the incomparably sharp golden light, there was an ear-piercing sound of friction in mid-air. Then, the golden light and the pink light slid past each other. The pink light had already split into two, drifting away from both sides of Chi Yu's body. However, the golden light still surged out in its original path. In terms of sharpness, how could it compare to the Xianyuan sword? Yes, at this critical moment, Chi Yu finally took out his godly weapon. However, because the energy released by the Xianyuan sword was blocked, it could not lock onto Ling'er's body. However, this was also what Chi Yu wanted to see. With a teleportation, Ling'er had already escaped from the energy released by the Xianyuan sword. A faint light flickered. Holding the Xianyuan sword in his right hand, Chi Yu quietly looked at Ling'er, who appeared not far away. Perhaps because the sharp aura of the Xianyuan sword scared her, after Ling'er used teleportation to appear, she did not chase after Chi Yu. Instead, she appeared in the air tens of meters away from him. A pair of beautiful eyes stared firmly at the Xianyuan sword in Chi Yu's hand. Chi Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He did not expect Ling'er to have such a variety of tactics. He could not help but ask doubtfully, "How did you do it? How could you suddenly make such a large amount of energy disappear? Moreover, it produced a gravitational field, causing my body to unconsciously move closer to you." Ling'er looked at Chi Yu in a daze. She obviously did not expect that under such circumstances, Chi Yu could actually escape from the range of her energy control so quickly. Not only that, he could even launch a counterattack against her. One had to know that among the enemies she had fought in the past, every time she used this fighting method, most of the enemies would vomit blood without her attack. Coupled with the sharpness of her Devil's Kiss, the battle could be directly ended. Because that was not real energy at all. Chi Yu, it seems that I really have to look at you in a different light. Under such circumstances, you were still able to break free from my energy shroud. You can be my opponent. Ling'er looked at the Xianyuan sword in Chi Yu's hand. Although Chi Yu did not say it, she had seen this divine sword appear a few times. She understood that it must be a super-divine weapon that belonged to the East. Otherwise, it would not have been able to deal with the sure-kill attack of her Devil's Kiss in such a way. In fact, Chi Yu knew his difficulties. Although he seemed to have easily solved the problem at the critical moment, it was not easy for him to deal with it in this world. The energy in his body was misused, causing him to have to use a large amount of spiritual power to regain control of the energy. And the moment he lost control just now, his body had already suffered a certain amount of damage. And the intense stimulation could only be withstood by his body with the source of nature. If it was someone else, the result would indeed be the same as Ling'er expected. The meridians that had been fully modified by the energy of nature reflected the best effect at this time, so he could maintain his calm on the surface. At the very least, Ling'er could not see that his internal condition was actually very bad just by looking at it with her eyes. So that's how it is. However, you are indeed very powerful to be able to make the mimicry energy so realistic. Even I could not see it. Chi Yu could not help but sigh. In terms of the use of energy, Ling'er was even better than him. Ling'er said indifferently, "That's because you do not understand the characteristics of our ability in the infernal realm. When I attacked you just now, the energy I used was not completely mimicry. In fact, it's not completely a mimicry. A small part of it is formed by directly absorbing the various negative energies of your world. Under the control of my own energy, I can make it attack you, but I can also make it suddenly dissipate, creating a feeling of weightlessness for you." Chiyu nodded and said, "So that's how it is. Ling'er, do you think there's a point in us fighting like this? Although we are fated to not be partners, I am very willing to treat you as a friend." A trace of anger appeared in Ling'er's eyes. Hearing Chiyu's words, she could not help but think of the scene when she was rejected. "If we are not husband and wife, then we are enemies. Stop talking nonsense, take this." Ling'er moved again. This time, what Chiyu saw was a long line of afterimages. With the experience of fighting her before, Chiyu knew that Ling'er's strength was far greater than he had imagined. Therefore, he did not dare to be careless. Seeing the afterimages coming towards him, he quickly raised the Xianyuan sword in front of him. He didn't launch an attack, but the energy of the Qilan's origin surged into the Xianyuan sword. Suddenly, an incomparably sharp aura poured out of the Xianyuan sword, and the enormous energy aura immediately caused the afterimage that was coming at him to stagnate. That was the Xianyuan sword, the most offensive ancient divine weapon of the East, the Xianyuan sword. Ling'er raised the Devil's Kiss in her hand, and all the afterimages suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, her body appeared beside Chiyu, the Devil's Kiss carrying a 3-foot-long pink light slashing towards Chiyu's shoulder. Chiyu did not move at first. Hesitating about Ling'er's teleportation ability, he could only choose to stay still. Although this was relatively passive, Chiyu believed that with his quick reaction ability, he could still deal with it. The source of nature was indeed the power of nature, and Chiyu had just raised his water thundercloud force to the 8-cloud level before coming here. His self-healing ability was almost unparalleled. Although the energy in his body was consumed due to the collision between the two special abilities, with the fusion of these two special abilities, his meridians had completely recovered under the nourishment, and the energy in his body had also returned to its original position. Kiran's 2 plums behind him quickly absorbed the energy molecules in the air, quickly replenishing the energy consumed by Chiyu. Because Ling'er used her full strength in anger, the suction force of the Devil's Kiss increased a little, causing Chiyu's body to involuntarily tilt. This caused the time it took for the Devil's Kiss to slash his body to become shorter. This time, Chiyu did not dodge. He also wanted to test whether the divine weapon from the Hell World was stronger, or the divine weapon from the East was sharper. He used the power of his fingers and wrist. When he felt the Devil's Kiss approaching, he unhesitatingly placed the Xianyuan sword on his shoulder, and the huge Xianyuan sword directly welcomed the Devil's Kiss. With a crisp sound, Chiyu and Ling'er's bodies froze in an instant, and the huge energy completely fixed their bodies in place. The pink light flickered like a snake, and it also let out a strange sound, as if it was attracted by lightning. The Xianyuan sword and the Demon's Kiss were quite different in terms of size. The golden sword released a surging light, while the Demon's Kiss had already become somewhat dark between the pink light. The huge energy aura was able to confront the Xianyuan sword. This proved that the Devil's Kiss was indeed powerful. But Ling'er's heart ached to see her most beloved Devil's Kiss. At this moment, a third of the Devil's Kiss had already been pierced by Chiyu's longsword. The golden light spread from the gap, and the incomparably sharp energy passed through the Devil's Kiss, causing Ling'er to unconsciously feel as if she was about to be cut off. The mana in her body circulated at a high speed, but it could not completely neutralize the powerful sharpness. What kind of sword was that? Not only was it huge, but its attack power was also so abnormal. Even his Devil's Kiss was damaged by its attack. Chiyu's Xianyuan sword suddenly trembled, and the blade turned, producing a powerful force that shook Ling'er's delicate body. After this confrontation, he could not help but feel relieved. After all, in terms of quality, the Xianyuan sword was more powerful. How could something from hell compare to the Xianyuan sword that was condensed from the energy of the sun, moon, stars, mountains, rivers, and trees? Ling'er looked down at her devil's kiss. If it was a normal injury, it wouldn't have been a problem. Perhaps with her powerful strength, she would be able to repair the devil's kiss after a certain period of time. But at this moment, although the devil's kiss was separated from the Xianyuan sword, the gap was still flickering with golden light. This could only prove one thing. The sharpness of the Xianyuan sword had already damaged the soul of the devil's kiss. Although it did not mean that it could not be repaired, it was easier said than done. A powerful aura surged continuously. This time, Ling'er was truly angry. When she was young, when she just started cultivating, Satan gave this devil's kiss to her. In a sense, the reason why Ling'er could have her current strength was because the devil's kiss had a great influence on her. This could be seen from the fact that the characteristics of the energy she possessed were very similar to the devil's kiss. In Ling'er's heart, the devil's kiss was her best friend and companion. No matter what, it would always accompany her quietly. However, just now, her devil's kiss was actually damaged by Chiyu, and it was an extremely heavy injury. Such a blow, coupled with Chiyu's repeated rejections, caused Ling'er's emotions that truly belonged to hell to appear in her heart. She did not say anything, but the cold glint in her eyes told Chiyu many things. A layer of cold light appeared in her pink eyes, and a black aura appeared behind Ling'er. As it expanded rapidly, it became like a black hole. An incomparably huge amount of energy surged towards Ling'er's body. The energy that was full of evil aura made Chiyu's heart sink. At this moment, Ling'er's body began to change. The first thing that changed was the long pink hair on her head. It wasn't her hair that changed, but on top of Ling'er's head, two small curved horns grew on both sides, which looked very cute. The pink light in her eyes became deeper than before. Although it was not the terrifying blood-red color, at this moment, it was easy to associate it with bloodthirstiness. A huge amount of dark energy continued to condense in her body, and Ling'er's demon physique also revealed itself at this time. A pair of black wings spread out behind her, and the dazzling black light had a layer of purple aura at the edge, allowing Chiyu to see it clearly in the darkness. The appearance of the pair of wings immediately caused Ling'er's aura to change dramatically. Her delicate body seemed to become more slender, and her entire body was constantly enlarging according to the proportion. Her height actually expanded from about 1.7 meters to nearly 2.5 meters. Although this did not affect her beauty, the pressure that it brought to Chiyu was completely different. Immediately afterward, along with the appearance of the first pair of wings, a second pair of the same wings also appeared quietly. A huge amount of dark energy caused a circle of purple ripples to appear around the circular black hole behind her. Ling'er slowly closed her eyes, and a trace of enjoyment appeared on her pretty face. She seemed to like this dark energy very much. Under the influence of the huge energy, a tyrannical light appeared in Ling'er's eyes. She looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. The four wings on her back completely spread out, and under the four wings that had already appeared, two more wings instantly appeared. 6 black wings completely revealed the purest dark energy. Compared to the terrifying Demon King, the aura that her 6 wings gave Chiyu was different. With these 6 wings, Ling'er's strength seemed to have doubled in an instant, and the demon's kiss in her hand also turned black under the effect of the 6 wings on her back. The huge energy aura quickly condensed, and the black hole behind her gradually disappeared. However, the 6-winged Ling'er's gaze towards Chiyu was completely different. There was even a trace of a cruel light at the corner of her mouth as she looked at Chiyu. Suddenly, something occurred to Chiyu. The feeling that Ling'er gave him now was very familiar. With a flash of inspiration, he understood why this feeling was so familiar to him. He blurted out, "Demonization?" Ling'er looked at Chiyu coldly, and the light in her eyes was completely bloodthirsty. Yes, at the same time that the 6-winged wings appeared, she reached the state of demonization due to the anger in her heart. As an expert of the Hell faction, her demonization was completely different from Qi Yu's demonization. Qi Yu's demonization would cause his mentality to lose balance, and his brain would also become sluggish. He only wanted to completely destroy the enemy in front of him. Tao Taro Speed Update. Chapter 246. Demonification. So you people who belong to the infernal realm can demonify. Ling'er, when I was in London, I was demonized as well. Does that have anything to do with you? Qi Yu asked. Ling'er slowly nodded her head. That's right. In order to help you recover your strength, and also because of my recognition of you, I shed my tears in the depths of your heart. The tears of a demon. It can make your strength even more explosive when it erupts. At the same time, it can also bring you into the realm of demonification when you are completely enraged. Hearing Ling'er's explanation, Qi Yu couldn't help but come to a realization. No wonder Grandmaster Zagru once said that there was an evil energy in the depths of his heart, and it was an extremely pure evil energy. So it was actually Ling'er's tears. He hadn't expected this outcome, but it was all in the past now. Facing the six-winged Ling'er, he had no choice but to focus. Even he himself did not know if he could defeat Ling'er in her current state. Ling'er stared coldly at Qi Yu. Give up resisting. Because resistance is meaningless to you, I, who possess the royal bloodline of the infernal realm. My 6 wings are 1.5 times stronger than the Dreadlord's. You have no chance at all. Don't tell me you don't need to use your 4 wings now? Since that's the case, you can go and die. This time, Ling'er did not use instant teleportation again. She floated proudly in the distance, the demon's kiss in her hand, creating a black whirlwind that swept directly towards Qi Yu's body. The huge energy fluctuations caused the air to solidify. In front of dark energy, it seemed that all other energy elements suffered a destructive blow, causing Qi Yu to be unable to absorb the energy he wanted from the air for a moment. Sensing the massive energy fluctuations, Qi Yu knew that it was impossible. Ling'er would no longer be merciful to him. However, if Ling'er could do this, how could he, who owed her a favor, do the same? He retreated swiftly. The golden wings that represented the golden-winged eagle floated out. In order to further increase his defense, the red rhombus-shaped scales on Qi Yu's forehead lit up. Scorching hot air was suddenly released, and under the tremendous energy, the red scales on Qi Yu's forehead lit up. Qi Yu's Kirin armor was instantly covered in a layer of fiery red. Yes, Kirin Qi appeared. The Kirin orb had also turned red due to the appearance of the Kirin red. The huge energy wave caused Qi Yu's ability to lean towards his own fire attribute Thundercloud Force. The scorching airflow spread. The Xianyuan sword in his hand was raised high in the air. Qi Yu used the wings on his back to continuously retreat, increasing the distance between him and Ling'er. The darkness energy released by Ling'er no longer seemed to be affected by distance. The incomparably viscous darkness energy reached Qi Yu's body in an instant, frantically engulfing him. Ignoring the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, the dark energy formed a huge dark tornado with Qi Yu as the center. The moment the black tornado took shape, a huge amount of energy filled with destructive energy appeared. The moment the black tornado formed, it immediately turned into countless sharp blades from the dark world, cutting at Qi Yu's body. This time, there was no longer the suction energy from before. Instead, it was a pure attack. This was the first time Qi Yu faced such pure dark energy. The huge energy fluctuations immediately caused his body to feel sluggish. Under the impression of the dark energy, many negative emotions subconsciously appeared in his mind. Although this did not completely affect his fighting strength, it still caused his body to become sluggish. A faint light flickered, and the light in Qi Yu's eyes became stronger. A silver light appeared around his body without warning. Under Qi Yu's deliberate control, the silver light flowed and actually broke through the dark tornado, enveloping the entire dark airflow. A strange scene appeared. Within the silver light, the dark energy that was originally attacking Chi-Yu and making ear-piercing sounds as it rubbed against the Kirin red on his body suddenly disappeared. The area enveloped by the silver light turned into an energy vacuum. Ling'er looked at the scene in front of her and could not help but be surprised. This is the power of a domain. You didn't seem to use it the last time. Energy Immunity Silver Dragon Cover. That's right, it was the power of a domain. It had been a while since Chi-Yu used this Silver Dragon Cover domain, but he was not worried that there would be any problems when he used it. He had not used it recently because Chi-Yu's own energy was extremely strong. Once he used this domain, not only could he neutralize his opponent's energy, but he could also make his own energy unable to be used. However, in the face of Ling'er's tyrannical attack, if he relied on the sharp edge of the Xianyuan sword to forcibly break through, it would definitely consume a lot of his own energy. At the same time, under the influence of the dark energy, there was a possibility that he would be attacked by Ling'er. After weighing the pros and cons, Chi-Yu used the Silver Dragon Cover, and the energy immunity effect immediately helped him get through the crisis. The silver light disappeared, and Chi-Yu appeared in front of Ling'er with the same fiery red light. However, the Xianyuan sword in his hand lit up, and the golden light became even more intense under the red light. To Chi-Yu's surprise, a milky white light suddenly appeared on his left wrist. With the help of the milky white light, the dark energy in the air was actually dispersed to a certain extent. He subconsciously looked at his wrist, and the milky white light that was emitting was actually the Serira bead. Ever since he became stronger, Chi-Yu rarely paid attention to the benefits that the Serira bead brought to him. When he was demonized, the Serira bead did not exhibit its effects. In fact, what Chi-Yu did not know was that the Serira bead contained the Buddhist relics left behind by more than 10 senior monks. The pure Buddhist energy was the nemesis of any evil aura. Furthermore, it wasn't because the relic beads hadn't been able to unleash their full potential, but because the Buddhist energy contained within the relic beads wasn't something that could be easily revealed. Chi-Yu had only been helped by the tiny bit of Buddhist energy on the surface. This point, even Zagru only discovered it later. Before Zagru was ready to return to Tibet, he deliberately used his living relic to help Chi-Yu completely activate the Buddhist energy of the Serira bead. Therefore, when he was besieged by the dark energy filled with evil aura, the Serira bead's effect naturally appeared. A faint divine light appeared in Chi-Yu's eyes. Feeling the strong rejection of the Buddhist energy of the Serira bead against the dark energy, he could not help but reveal a faint smile. With the Serira bead, what was there for him to be afraid of? Although the dark energy was powerful, as long as the Serira bead could protect his body, it was enough. A faint divine light flashed. The energy of the Xianyuan sword in Chi-Yu's hand became more solid. Chi-Yu discovered the magical effect of the Serira bead. Under the guidance of the Chi, Ling'er, who was constantly releasing dark energy, naturally also discovered it. Looking at the pure Buddhist light emitted by the Serira bead, she could not help but frown. No wonder you are unwilling to cooperate with us. You have something that is close to the aura of light. It seems that you don't hate Yamu and the others at all, and are even cooperating with them, right? Chi-Yu shook his head. Ling'er, you misunderstand. This is not something that belongs to the West. I don't know if you've heard of Buddhism, but it's one of the most important religions in our Yan Huang Republic. Buddhism has Buddhist relics, and the bracelet I'm wearing is made from Buddhist relic. It's filled with Buddhist energy. It has a strong dispelling effect on any negative aura. With a faint smile, Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a faint divine light. He folded his hands in front of his chest and looked at Ling'er. Although he had already explained, however, he found that the dark energy released by Ling'er not only did not show any signs of decreasing, but it was also constantly increasing. It's useless to say anything. The moment I entered the demonified realm, your fate was already sealed. The 6 wings on Lingaire's back fluttered slightly. Then, the dark aura covered the sky and covered the earth. Everything in the surroundings suddenly changed. Qiyu had a domain-type ability. How could Lingaire not? The huge amount of dark energy changed. Qiyu could clearly feel that his body had entered a swamp, and the huge amount of dark energy had begun to corrode his body. The white light emitted by the Sarira bead became stronger, but it was not enough to block the huge amount of dark energy. Lingaire's body and her aura had completely disappeared, so Qiyu did not know which direction to attack. Lingaire's voice came from all directions, entering the dark swamp. You will be swallowed by the darkness. I don't want to see you die, so let the darkness here swallow you. Qiyu, this is one of my strongest domains. From now on, everything between you and me will completely disappear. Hearing Lingaire's words, Qiyu could not help but be stunned. Although her voice was very cold, Qiyu could hear a trace of loneliness in it. It seemed that even in the demonified realm, she did not really want to destroy him. However, Qiyu obviously did not have much time to think about this. Facing this dark swamp domain, he knew what he had to do. The milky white light emitted by the Sarira bead enveloped Qiyu's body completely, so that the dark energy outside could not invade his body for the time being. However, Qiyu could clearly feel that the boundless dark energy outside the Sarira bead was so powerful that it was completely destructive and engulfing. What surprised Qiyu even more was that other than the energy on the Sarira bead, whether it was the energy of his Kirin's origin or the fire attribute Kirin's thundercloud force, none of them had any ability to resist the purest dark energy outside. Could it be that the dark energy was immune to other types of energy? Could the energy immunity Silver Dragon shield dissolve the energy outside? Qiyu did not know. When he was about to use the Silver Dragon shield, he was shocked to discover a problem. In this dark swamp domain, all of his domain abilities could not be used. Not only could the energy immunity Silver Dragon shield not be used, but even his shapeless Big Dipper realm technique could not be summoned through Kirin's secret. This was the first time that Qiyu encountered such a situation. At this moment, as he felt the dark energy outside becoming stronger and stronger, his heart sank. Qiyu understood that this time, Lingaire was indeed prepared to destroy him, and had no intention of showing any mercy at all. This dark swamp domain seemed to be very easy for her to cast, but now it seemed that it was so powerful that it was definitely a super domain. Once the Buddhist power of the Sarira bead disappeared, he could only rely on his own energy to resist. In this case, the dark energy was almost immune to all of his energy. In this case, how could he survive in this dark swamp domain? Even if he could temporarily survive in this domain after fusing with a few types of energy, the energy was ultimately limited. The biggest problem in this dark swamp domain was that he couldn't get any energy to replenish himself. Apart from the dark aura, there were no energy molecules of any other attribute. How could it be easy to break out of this place? A faint light flickered, and Qiyu knew that he had encountered the biggest problem. However, it was fortunate that he had the Buddhist power of the Sarira bead, which gave him time to think. The only thing he could rely on now was the Xianyuan sword in his hand. The Xianyuan sword was known as the Destroyer of Domains. If he wanted to rush out of this dark swamp, he could only rely on its power. As he thought of this, the light on his body gradually brightened. Under his full support, the energy of the Xianyuan sword continued to increase. Qiyu did not use the cosmic crimson gold armor. This was because, without the help of external energy, if he hastily used the cosmic crimson gold armor, even though he could complete the transformation, it would consume too much energy. Now, he was only facing a domain and not Lingaire. Even if he could get out of this place, it did not mean that he could defeat Lingaire. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Qiyu decided to use his current state to activate the powerful attack of the Xianyuan sword. A strong light flashed and Qiyu took a deep breath. A faint layer of golden light appeared on his body. the light of the sun, moon, and stars on the Xianyuan sword in his hand suddenly lit up. The strong light was so dazzling that even the Buddhist light around his body could not withstand it. With the faint light flashing, Qi Yu raised the Xianyuan sword in front of him and poured all the energy in his body into it. Under the combined effect of the thundercloud force, the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword became stronger and stronger. As the owner of the Xianyuan sword, Qi Yu was completely immersed in the divine power of the Xianyuan sword. The giant sword, which was filled with benevolent energy, seemed to have truly become a part of his body. It was connected to his body through his hand. Raising both hands high into the air, the Xianyuan sword erupted with a golden light that enveloped Qi Yu's entire body, dyeing him golden. The Xianyuan divine sword, which was filled with a divine aura, emitted a sharp aura in all directions, forcibly avoiding a portion of the dark swamp. This was the power of a divine weapon that did not belong to any elemental attribute. The sharp energy was not something that dark energy could resist. Qi Yu understood that although the energy of the Xianyuan sword was able to resist the dark swamp as he had expected, this was a domain after all. As someone who also possessed a domain, he knew that this was a domain. Although the power of a domain depended on the energy of the user, relatively speaking, because of the various characteristics of a domain, the energy consumed by the user was definitely much less than that of the person trapped in the domain. Therefore, he had to leave this domain in the shortest time possible. Only then could he absorb enough energy from the air with his source of nature constitution. Therefore, he had to leave this domain in the shortest time possible. That way, he would be able to absorb enough energy molecules of various attributes from the air again with his source of nature constitution. Therefore, after increasing the energy of the Xianyuan sword, Qi Yu floated up without hesitation. He spread the four wings on his back and shouted, "Unity of heaven and man." The first of the Xianyuan 8 laws was activated with the support of the 7-cloud energy in his body. Relying on his tyrannical strength, Qi Yu did not use the ultimate transformation this time. He used the complete form of unity of heaven and man. His figure disappeared. To be precise, he was completely swallowed by the golden light emitted by the Xianyuan sword. At this moment, there was no distinction between the sword and the person. The huge energy aura caused the Xianyuan sword to suddenly explode. The sword was more than 10 meters long and carried an incomparably huge amount of energy. It suddenly slashed in a direction. With the explosion of the energy of the Xianyuan sword, the dark energy in the dark swamp was like ice and snow under the effect of the huge amount of energy. No matter how difficult it was to deal with this viscous swamp energy, it could not stop the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. The huge amount of energy penetrated straight through. The power of the Xianyuan sword as a domain killer was fully displayed at this moment. An ear-piercing sound rang out. Qi Yu, who was in the unity of God and sword state, suddenly felt the surroundings lighten. All the pressure disappeared completely. He almost subconsciously quickly absorbed as much of the energy that he had fused with the Xianyuan sword into his body, minimizing the loss of energy in his body. The golden light disappeared and Qi Yu returned to his original form. He floated above the Tianxiang mountain. Ling'er looked at Qi Yu in shock. She clearly did not expect that the godly weapon in Qi Yu's hands could not only destroy her devil's kiss, but also have the ability to break through domains. The light in her eyes was a little shocked. The dark energy on her body was also not as dense as before. Using her most powerful domain had a huge impact on her body, causing her own energy to be greatly weakened. A faint light flashed, and a hint of coldness appeared in Qi Yu's eyes. Ling'er already had the intention to kill him, so he could not just wait for death. The Xianyuan sword was pointed diagonally towards the ground. As it absorbed the energy in the air, Qi Yu stared at Ling'er, waiting for her next attack. Ling'er looked at Qi Yu and snorted coldly, "Fine, you." Ling'er only said the word "you" before she stopped. Her delicate body turned slightly, and a huge amount of energy swept out once again. This time, the energy gathered towards the devil's kiss in her hand. The illusory figure had 3 pairs of black wings, and was dyed with a layer of faint purple light. It looked extremely dazzling, but it was this dazzling figure that was about to bring Chi-Yu the threat of death. Lung'er suddenly slashed out with the devil's kiss in her hand, and a huge amount of energy condensed into a black light in the air. The edges of the light were dark purple, and each of them was not aimed at Chi-Yu's body. However, when the energy was completely released, Chi-Yu could clearly feel that these strange black lights' final destination was his body. The battle had already reached this point, and both Chi-Yu and Lung'er had suffered a lot of physical exhaustion. At this moment, the two of them were completely focused on each other, and Chi-Yu could not hold back anymore, at least not now. Lung'er's attack and the tyrannical dark energy seemed to be a huge threat to him. The golden light shone again, and Chi-Yu did not retreat. Instead, his body suddenly rushed forward, and the huge golden light transformed into a layer of golden light in his hand. With the Xianyuan sword, Chi-Yu's strength could indeed be greatly improved. At the very least, when facing the opponent's attack, with the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, the sword light could almost ignore all the opponent's energy fluctuations. Unless one was as tyrannical as the Bull Demon King, it was almost impossible to resist the Xianyuan sword head-on. In the air, the golden and black light constantly collided. In order to save energy, Chi-Yu did not completely release the golden light, but with the huge blade of the Xianyuan sword that was more than 2.5 meters long, he could easily protect his body. As the golden light on the sword continued to flicker, it dissolved Lung'er's attacks one by one, and Chi-Yu's body was getting closer and closer to Lung'er. A faint light flickered, and Lung'er watched as Chi-Yu gradually approached her, but she did not panic at all. Just then, the golden light suddenly shone. When Chi-Yu's Xianyuan sword was already in front of her, Lung'er suddenly put down the devil's kiss in her hand. Chi-Yu's sword was originally just a probing attack. However, when he suddenly saw that Lung'er actually gave up resisting and seemed to want to use her body to resist the sharpness of his Xianyuan sword, he could not help but panic. His strong fighting spirit suddenly disappeared, and in its place was panic. No one knew how terrifying the Xianyuan sword's sharpness was more than him. Once it slashed Lung'er's body, whether she was a god or a demon, there would only be one result. This situation was definitely not what Chi-Yu wanted to see. What made Chi-Yu even more surprised was that Lung'er not only put down the devil's kiss in her hand. At the same time, she completely withdrew the dark energy that her body emitted. Under such circumstances, her body seemed so fragile. The cold killing intent in her eyes disappeared completely, and Lung'er's moving pink eyes were filled with sadness as she looked at Chi-Yu. At this moment, looking at Lung'er's sad eyes in the blink of an eye, Chi-Yu seemed to see Wen-Ting, who sacrificed herself for him. Without any hesitation, when the golden sword was about to slash Lung'er's body, Chi-Yu forcibly pulled back the Xianyuan sword. Even if doing so would cause damage to his body due to the recoil of energy, Chi-Yu did not hesitate to do so. He did not want to see Lung'er die in front of him. The golden light retracted, and the Xianyuan sword was thrown to the side by Chi-Yu with all his strength. At this moment, Lung'er, who was filled with sadness, suddenly became a little blurred. A slender hand appeared in front of Lung'er's chest. Before Chi-Yu could react, the slender hand had already landed on Chi-Yu's chest. With a loud bang, Chi-Yu's body was sent flying. His tall body drew a beautiful parabola in the air as he spat out blood. As soon as the dark energy entered his body, it immediately erupted without reservation. Although he had the double defense of Kirin Red and Kirin Armor, it was not enough to stop the six-winged Lung'er's palm. As his body slid in the air, the heart-wrenching pain spread to every inch of his body. Although Chi-Yu could not see Lung'er's situation because of his body's shape, his mental power clearly captured that Lung'er, who was almost cut in half by his sword, had disappeared. The real Ling'er had quietly appeared behind him. Mimicry could not only mimic energy, but could also mimic any living creature. In the face of Ling'er's special ability, Chi Yu had once again fallen for it. Furthermore, he had suffered heavy injuries due to his own carelessness. The meridians in his body had been greatly damaged by Ling'er's tyrannical palm. It seemed that he was still too soft-hearted. Chi Yu could not help but sigh in his heart. However, he did not regret it this time. At this moment, Chi Yu was filled with joy. Although his body had been severely injured by Ling'er's tyrannical palm attack, his origin of nature's energy had reached a terrifying level. With the help of the water thundercloud force, his origin of nature's self-healing ability had reached an extremely terrifying level. On the surface, his body seemed to have suffered great damage, and even Kiran's body had terrifying cracks. However, at this moment the energy in his body was circulating crazily. Kiran's marrow cleansing and tendon-changing technique, combined with the energy of the origin of nature, was healing his internal injuries at an extremely terrifying speed. The enormous energy and tyrannical healing caused the pain in Chi Yu's body to continuously decrease. He was now completely able to control his body to stabilize in the air. However, Chi Yu did not do so, because he did not want to continue fighting with Ling'er. Although Ling'er had used his feelings to attack him, Chi Yu did not really hate her. After all, compared to Yamu, at least Ling'er had saved his life before. Therefore, Chi Yu's body that was gliding in the air directly fell down the mountain. Due to gravity, the speed of his descent continued to increase. Ling'er floated in the air, still maintaining the appearance when she launched the palm attack. There was a strange glint in her rose-red eyes. Her previous attack naturally had a purpose, which was to make Chi Yu suddenly launch a sneak attack when he thought that he had hit her. In order to complete the sneak attack, she even kept her demon's kiss into her body after transforming into a phantom. In this way, she could completely make the dark aura around her disappear in the shortest time, and it would also have a more confusing effect. Originally, Ling'er did not expect that she could directly injure Chi Yu with her mimicry ability. She only hoped to gain the upper hand and then launch a storm of attacks on Chi Yu. After all, the Xianyuan sword in Chi Yu's hand also posed a great threat to her. However, as the Princess of Hell, Ling'er never expected that Chi Yu would actually retract the Xianyuan sword at the last moment, and because he retracted the longsword that was slashing at her phantom, she hit him in the chest. Although Kiran Red brought a certain amount of recoil, Ling'er was too familiar with her ability. Even if this attack was not enough to destroy Chi Yu, it could at least severely injure him. As long as she continued to pursue him, she had some confidence in destroying him. However, Chi Yu's action of retracting the Xianyuan sword was deeply imprinted in Ling'er's mind at this moment. She clearly felt that something in the depths of her heart seemed to have been touched. He didn't want to hurt me, and it was because he didn't want to hurt me that he received my powerful attack. Although I'm stronger than him in terms of overall strength, his sword already gives him the strength to contend with me. However, at the critical moment of the battle, he gave up attacking me just because he was afraid of hurting me. Seeing Chi Yu's body floating in the air, Ling'er could not bear to chase after him and hit him again. She was already at a loss at this time. What should I do? Tao Taro updated the text version immediately. Chapter 247. Just as Ling'er was hesitating, a low voice suddenly rang out beside her. Your Highness, now is not the time to feel pity. As the Princess of Hell, you must make the right decision. Ling'er was startled by the sudden voice. Ah, it's you, but should I really kill him now? You saw for yourself, if it wasn't for the fear of hurting me, I wouldn't have been able to obtain the saint energy so easily. I'm afraid the final outcome is hard to say. No, Your Highness, you must make a choice. If you choose to let him go, then in the future, we may very well have to face a powerful enemy. In the east of this plain, there are many mysterious things. And these mysteries may very well become the biggest obstacle to us conquering the whole world in the future. As the princess of hell, as the only daughter of His Majesty Satan, you must not be soft-hearted because of a human. Since he is unwilling to submit to us, then, the only ending for him is death." Ling'er was silent, her pink long hair seemed to have lost its luster. Her big gentle eyes constantly flashed with a complicated light. For a moment she did not know what to do. She really could not steel her heart to make such a decision. "Your Highness, could it be that you have fallen in love with that human?" The low voice rang out again. Ling'er sighed. "I'm afraid so. Even in my demonized state, I actually can't steel my heart to kill him. You also know the extent of my power. Even if he doesn't die from my attack, his body will suffer a huge blow. I'm afraid that he will not be able to recover to his current level in the future. To us, he may not be a strong threat. Unless, can't we just let him go?" "Your Highness, you're wrong. Have you forgotten? That human has the power of nature. Nature can change everything. With the power of nature, even after taking a full blow from you, there is still hope for him to recover. Furthermore, the power of nature can also allow him to improve in the future. His potential is huge, so, before he reaches a level where he can threaten us, he must be destroyed. Forget it. Since you are not willing to do it yourself, then, leave this task to me." A black figure suddenly appeared behind Ling'er. In a flash, he had already rushed down the mountain, chasing in the direction where Chi Yu disappeared. There were 4 pairs of wings on the back of his tall figure. Unlike Ling'er's black wings, they were real wings. Every single black feather was so clear. Ling'er was stunned for a moment before she shouted, Don't do that." However, she knew that it was too late. No one knew better than her how powerful her guardian angel was. Even if it was just 1 second, it was enough for him to destroy the heavily injured Chi Yu 10 times over. Warm tears flowed down her cheeks, and a huge amount of energy burst forth, but Ling'er didn't know what she should do. He was dead, he was dead, he was still dead. At this moment, her heart was filled with painful emotions. She did not know if she was in pain because of Chi Yu's death, or because he did not choose her. Just as Ling'er's emotions were fluctuating because of Chi Yu, she was shocked to find that the place where Chi Yu had fallen suddenly lit up with a reddish-gold light. That was definitely not the energy undulations of her guardian angel. However, this energy was abnormally strong, and the huge energy aura shocked her. Although Ling'er had 6 wings, she was actually only slightly stronger than the Terror Demon King. The 5 and 6 wings that she had just grown were not fully utilized yet. Otherwise, she would not have been unable to defeat Chi Yu when Chi Yu was not at his full strength. However, her guardian angel was different. He was the strongest existence in hell apart from her father, the great demon king Satan. With the power of 8 wings, he had forcibly broken through the barriers of the plane and truly arrived in this world. Ling'er believed that apart from her father, she had never met a match for his strength. At this moment, the reddish-gold energy that appeared below seemed to be obstructing her guardian angel. How was this possible? What kind of power could obstruct her guardian angel? Ling'er's heart was filled with questions. While Ling'er was puzzled, Chi Yu was in extreme pain. As his body fell, Chi Yu's spiritual power kept track of Ling'er's movements. As long as she did not chase after him, it meant that his plan had succeeded. Although she had slapped him, if she really had some feelings for him and did not want to hurt him, would she really kill him? Since he did not want to fight with Ling'er, Chi Yu had some hope in his heart. If things could be resolved in this way, it would not be a good ending. However, just as Chi Yu's body was about to fall down the mountain, a suffocating energy suddenly appeared in midair. This energy was definitely not Ling'er's. This was Chi Yu's first reaction because the tyrannical degree of this energy was far beyond the level that Ling'er could reach. The incomparably fierce murderous aura caused every bit of energy in Chi Yu's body to fluctuate in an instant. He had no other choice. Although his internal injuries had yet to recover, Chi Yu had no other choice. He could only use his strongest power. When facing Lung-Er, he was a little reluctant to use his strongest energy, but when facing an enemy that could truly threaten his life, Qi Yu would not hesitate at all. A scorching hot air surged in his heart, and Qi Yu's body was instantly enveloped in a pale golden energy. Then, 4 wings suddenly spread out behind him, causing his falling speed to decrease rapidly. The energy from Wen Ting had completely fused with his body, and all the energy in his body also fused with the energy aura of the source of nature. Qi Yu's choice was very correct, and it was also very wise. He was going to use his strongest ability. The Kirin bead turned golden, and the red rhombus on his forehead suddenly shot out a ray of red light, instantly illuminating every inch of his body. Then, the Kirin mirror flew out from his left hand, and the Kirin illusion flew out from his right hand. The 3 energies simultaneously condensed towards the Kirin bead. The huge energy instantly spread, and the 4 colors of gold, silver, red, and black were replaced by light ribbons. They enveloped Qi Yu's body. His long red hair kept extending behind him, and only stopped when it reached his feet. Suddenly, a reddish-gold light erupted from the Kirin bead, fusing with Qi Yu's and Wen Ting's energy, forming a ball of light that stopped in front of Qi Yu's chest. There was a clanging sound, and a sturdy reddish-gold chest armor covered Qi Yu's firm chest muscles, perfectly fusing with the original Kirin armor. Then, the chest armor separately extended up, down, and up. It extended wide shoulder armor, and down, it covered Qi Yu's waist. The huge energy spread in an instant, and the reddish-gold light flowed to every corner of Qi Yu's body, forming an incomparably gorgeous reddish-gold armor. Every part of Qi Yu's body was covered perfectly, and the huge energy aura constantly spread out from his body. Blood-red veined patterns appeared on the reddish-gold armor, as though fresh blood was flowing within it. A pair of reddish-gold wings suddenly spread out from Qi Yu's back. The wings were as big as before, but the reddish-gold light shining on them was extraordinarily bright. Every reddish-gold feather had a clear pattern, and the enormous energy aura spread out in an instant. However, it was not over yet. At the same time that the reddish-gold wings appeared, a layer of dark red light suddenly lit up behind Qi Yu. That was the energy aura of Kirin hidden. Then, the dark red light turned into a pair of dark red wings, appearing below the reddish-gold wings. Together with the black wings that Kirin armor's second stage mutation, there were a total of 3 pairs of 6 wings on his back, extending outwards. The top pair was the reddish-gold wings, and the bottom pair was the black wings. The dark red Kirin hidden's wings appeared at the bottom. A layer of reddish-gold light appeared in front of Qi Yu, covering his face. The light of the sun, moon, and stars shone from his body, bringing with it layers of light and shadow, and merged into the reddish-gold armor. Suddenly, the blood-red patterns on the reddish-gold armor began to flow, and on the smooth surface of the armor, images of the sun, moon, and stars appeared. Kirin's shadow disappeared. After Qi Yu summoned the solar-lunisolar starry red golden armor, the power he used was not just Kirin's energy. After the fusion, the power increased several times. The Xianyuan sword in his hand flashed, and he directly slashed at the position in the air that made him feel suffocated. The huge energy light wave also lit up the valley where he was falling. A confused voice was heard, and the dark energy suddenly changed direction. Qi Yu, who had controlled his fall, quickly stabilized his body. Light flashed, and he took a deep breath. Qi Yu forcibly suppressed the injuries in his body. In that short period of time just now, although his self-healing ability was very strong, it was impossible for him to completely heal the injuries that his body had suffered in such a short period of time. After all, Lung-Er was very strong. When the solar-lunisolar starry red golden armor was used, the energy wave around his body suddenly changed. The huge energy wave caused everything around him to fluctuate. Although his combat power had been raised to the highest level, at this moment, Qi Yu had lost the ability to heal his injuries. This was because all the energy had been completely fused after the ultimate transformation. A black figure appeared in the sky above Chi-Yu, and a pair of cold eyes stared at Chi-Yu. The huge pressure became even stronger than before. The first person that came to Chi-Yu's mind was actually Chi-Yu. The energy aura was very similar to Chi-Yu's, but it was darker than Chi-Yu's energy. However, it was not as evil. In terms of the intensity of the energy, the enemy in front of him was even stronger than Chi-Yu. As for how strong it was, Chi-Yu could not really judge. However, Chi-Yu was shocked to discover that there were 8 black wings on the back of the person who had suddenly appeared. Each feather on the black wings looked like a black crystal, shining with a dark luster. It was a tall man who looked a little familiar. He was extremely handsome, and his tall body released a huge energy wave. His whole body was covered with a layer of black aura. The armor on his body was not a full body armor, and it only protected a few important parts. The black armor carried a faint energy aura. Although it was not strong, Chi-Yu could clearly feel that it was definitely compressed energy. Even the entire armor seemed to be formed by a huge amount of compressed energy. The 8 wings on his back were too dazzling for Chi-Yu. The strong energy oppressed Chi-Yu's body. Even though he had transformed into the cosmic crimson gold armor, Chi-Yu still did not have any advantage against him. His aura was completely suppressed. The light in Chi-Yu's eyes shrank and he said coldly, "You must be the guardian angel that Lung-Er mentioned." The tall man with the 8 wings nodded and said calmly, "We meet again. Her Highness couldn't steel her heart to destroy you, so leave this task to me." Chi-Yu looked at him in surprise and said, "Have we met before?" The tall man said calmly, "What do you think? If not for the fact that the princess was very interested in you, do you think you could have easily reached the basement and met Her Highness?" A thought flashed through his mind. Chi-Yu immediately recalled the scene when he was in the City of Hell. At that time, after entering the steeple, he had seen a huge statue. It was through the statue that he had entered the basement and rescued Ling-Er and the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King. "You are that statue?" Chi-Yu asked. "That's right. I am Her Highness' protector, and I will always be by her side. Anyone who wishes to harm Her Highness will have to go through me first. I had originally planned to let Her Highness gain some combat experience from you, but I didn't expect you to be so much stronger than I had imagined. Even just now, you did not use your full strength. Seeing that you once wanted to show mercy to Her Highness, I will leave your corpse intact." The light of the sun, moon, and stars on the Xianyuan sword became exceptionally clear, and the fused energy in his body began to circulate. The light in Chi-Yu's eyes turned cold. Facing such a strong opponent, the battle intent in his heart was even stronger than before. This was not Lung-Er. Since he wanted to kill him, then he would see who would be the one to destroy the other. Chi-Yu's chest was still aching, and the lunisolar crimson gold armor could not last for too long. This was different from the previous battle of attrition. Right now, he needed to end this battle quickly. The crimson gold light lit up, and the 6 wings on his back spread out. In a flash, he had already appeared beside the tall man. The Xianyuan sword in his hand shone with a surging energy. As his mind power locked onto his opponent's body, the sharp energy of the Xianyuan sword also locked onto his opponent, and he immediately launched a violent attack. The powerful energy fluctuations filled Chi-Yu with confidence. However, his confidence was quickly shattered. This was because his opponent had disappeared without any warning. Moreover, it was not teleportation. To be able to escape from his attack under such circumstances, it showed how strong his opponent was. Even his mind power and the aura of the Xianyuan sword could not lock onto his opponent. Although the energy of the Xianyuan sword could not lock onto his opponent, it was due to the lack of Xuanyuan's soul and his lack of strength. Even so, his opponent's strength was enough to shock Chi-Yu. Although the 8-winged guy in front of him didn't have Chi-Yu's Pengu axe, the energy fluctuations on his body were clearly above Chi-Yu's. Even Chi-Yu couldn't escape from the Xianyuan sword's lock. With a flash of light, Qi Yu instinctively pulled the Xianyuan sword in his hand to protect his chest. At that moment, an invisible energy had already enveloped his body. As if his body had been hit by a huge hammer, Qi Yu let out a muffled groan, and his body suddenly floated backwards. The 6 wings on his back shone brightly at the same time, and he used all his strength to dissolve the energy of his opponent's attack. That tall man didn't even move. He was still floating there, and the corner of his mouth revealed an indescribable light. Compared to me, your strength is really too insignificant. Your final outcome has long been decided. Qi Yu snorted coldly. Cut the crap and make your move. The reddish-gold light condensed again. Qi Yu understood that in the face of the difference in energy, it was impossible for him to defeat his opponent with battle technique. The biggest thing he could rely on now was the Xianyuan sword in his hand. All the fused energy burst forth at this moment, and a huge energy aura was released completely. He did not use the union of heaven and man. This was because he had to defeat his opponent in the shortest time possible with the least amount of energy expended. Therefore, at this moment, with the help of the solar-lunar star crimson golden armor, he directly used the second art of the Xianyuan 8 laws, meteor chases the moon. The golden light condensed in the air, and Qi Yu's body directly disappeared into the void. Countless golden shadows flickered in the air, and the huge energy light condensed rapidly. The sun, moon, and stars. At this moment, what appeared in the air was completely the golden light. Countless golden light spots covered every corner of the sky. As the second art of the Xianyuan 8 laws, meteor chases the moon had different ways of using it. Previously, when he was facing Qi Yu used the condensed form of meteor chases the moon. This time, he chose to use the scattered form of meteor chases the moon. Although the attacking form was different, as it was the ability of the Xianyuan sword itself, the effect it could unleash was extremely tyrannical. The enormous energy aura was completely restrained, and the golden specks of light condensed into golden balls of light in the air. What surprised the tall man was that the golden balls of light were still filled with the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, and at this moment, they were even more powerful. It was a few times stronger than before. There was no doubt that the Xianyuan 8 laws consumed a huge amount of energy, but at the same time, it was also the most powerful attack that the Xianyuan sword could unleash. Under the effect of that huge amount of energy, Qi Yu's attack power was raised to the limit. The huge amount of energy flickered, and the tall man's body surged with a layer of dark golden light. His entire body seemed to be made of metal, and every single energy aura was extremely tyrannical. His palms met in front of his chest, and a dark golden ball of light appeared. The ball of light did not increase in size from the moment it appeared, but the dark golden light became more and more obvious. As the huge amount of energy condensed, the 8 wings on his back automatically flap. With every flap, the dark golden ball of light between his palms would become a little more solid. Facing the second art of the Xianyuan 8 laws, even someone as tyrannical as him could not help but have a serious expression. Sensing the reddish-gold light in the valley, Langere floated over and saw the moment Qi Yu's figure disappeared. She could clearly feel the tyrannical energy fluctuations in the air, and her heart could not help but be shocked. Just as the tall man had said, Qi Yu did not use his full strength in the battle with her. Although she had also held back, it seemed that Qi Yu had held back even more. At least in his current state, he also had 6 wings. No wonder he was unwilling to cooperate with her. With his current strength, he seemed to be able to dominate an area. Seeing Qi Yu's strength, Langere was a little happy. At least this proved that she had not misjudged him. The 3 pairs of wings were reddish gold, dark red, and silver. When he had fought with her before, there seemed to be a pair of gold and a pair of black wings. The black wings seemed to have turned into the dark red pair, but the previous pair of golden wings had disappeared. Could it be that he was still holding back until now? Could it be that he also had the strength of 8 wings? Although Chi Yu had indeed hidden his strength before, at this time, Ling'er had somewhat overestimated him. Facing a peerless expert as strong as the eight-winged hell, how could Chi Yu still hold back? His opponent was so tyrannical that he had to raise all his strength to be able to barely fight against him. The golden wings in Ling'er's memory were obtained by Chi Yu when he absorbed a 10,000-year-old golden-winged eagle. It was not his real strength, but now his strength was different. The energy of the solar-lunisolar golden armor was condensed at this time, and the 3 pairs of wings were also condensed by Chi Yu's full strength. The silver wings were Kiran's origin energy. The reddish-gold wings appeared after his energy and Wen Ting's energy merged and appeared under the influence of the Xianyuan sword. As for the dark red wings, they were condensed by Kiran and all 4 types of thundercloud force in his body. No matter which pair of these 3 pairs of wings, no matter which pair was extremely tyrannical and had great effect, they could greatly increase Chi Yu's strength. The wings from the golden-winged eagle, on the other hand, were of a much lower level. When Chi Yu's energy completely merged, it disappeared on its own. It was not that Chi Yu wanted to hide anything. Taking a step back, even if Chi Yu found a way to get it out, it would not be his real strength, and it would not be of the same level as the other 3 pairs of wings. The dark golden light in front of the tall man became stronger and stronger. At this time, the sky above Tianxiang Mountain was illuminated by the golden light. The golden light moved one by one, and with an incomparably sharp aura, they shot towards the tall man below like meteors chasing the moon. Seeing this scene, Ling'er could not help but think of a kind of astronomical phenomenon, and that was meteor shower. That's right. The meteor shower was a method of using meteors chasing the moon. Previously, Chi Yu used the meteor chasing the moon comet against Chi Yu. In terms of overall energy, it was obvious that the meteor shower was more condensed. However, the meteor shower had the effect of superimposing attack. Naturally, Chi Yu chose to superimpose them, because in a situation where there was no divine weapon to rely on, it was impossible for the opponent to neutralize the meteor chasing the moon attack one by one. Loud explosions sounded continuously. Every sound was extremely shocking, and a huge energy wave shot up from the center of the collision, flashing brilliantly like fireworks. The dark golden light in front of the tall man was condensed from some unknown energy. Facing the attack of the Xianyuan 8 laws, it unexpectedly blocked one meteor shower after another. After the incomparably sharp energy collided with it, it produced a huge energy wave, causing the figure of the tall man with 8 wings to flicker unceasingly. A tyrannical light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes. At this time, he was extremely shocked. The opponent was actually able to block this level of attack with just energy. Could it be that he was stronger than the Demon Bull King? At this time, the meteor chasing the moon's power had been fully displayed, and Chi Yu had no other way but to display the effect of the Xianyuan 8 laws to the limit. Every time the tall man withstood an attack from Chi Yu, his body would automatically move backwards in the air, and the expression on his face would become more serious. The dark golden light ball in front of him would also fluctuate violently under the bombardment of the meteor shower. Every time it flickered, it would become a little more scattered. Under the unceasing stacking of attacks, it seemed that it would not be able to withstand it. The tall man growled, and the light in front of his chest suddenly lit up. A dark golden cross floated out and directly imprinted on the dark golden light ball in front of his chest. The dark golden light ball seemed to originally belong to this cross. It condensed and formed at the intersection point of the cross, and at this time the cross also changed form. A dark golden light shot up into the sky, and turned into a long sword that fell into his hand. The tall man moved, and under the effect of the huge energy, the dark golden long sword in his hand continuously swung out. Every time he swung it, he could neutralize the attack brought by the meteor chasing the moon. His strength was so strong that even as an enemy, Chi Yu could not help but gasp in amazement. This guy was simply too strong, to the point of inconceivably strong. In truth, Chi Yu's judgment was somewhat wrong. The tall man did not only use energy, but he was not strong enough to rely on energy alone to block Chi Yu's attack. The dark golden light ball that he had condensed was actually the same as Lung Er's Demon's Kiss. They were both demon weapons. Hell's three great demon weapons. Ranked last was the Demon's Kiss, and ranked second was the Dark Demon Sword in his hand, also known as the Fallen Demon Sword. The dark golden light ball was just a precursor to the appearance of the Dark Demon Sword, and it was also the most preserved form of the Dark Demon Sword. Although Chi Yu, who had transformed into a meteor chasing the moon, was surprised that the tall man was able to block his attack using the Xianyuan 8 laws, he did not know that the tall man was already shocked and angry. He had been secretly observing the battle between Chi Yu and Lung Er, and he could clearly feel that although Chi Yu had not fully unleashed his power, there was still a huge gap between his true strength and that of the tall man's. However, just as the battle began, he was shocked to discover that Chi Yu, who had transformed into the cosmic crimson golden armor, and with the assistance of the Xianyuan sword, the attack power generated was enough to threaten him. Otherwise, he would not have used the Dark Demon Sword. He had originally wanted to deal with Chi Yu head-on, but the powerful attack of Meteor Chase's moon had left him with no chance to do so. In fact, he had no choice but to transform into the original body of the Dark Demon's sword to defend himself. On the surface, it looked as if he had withstood the attack, but in reality, his Dark Demon sword had already suffered countless tiny wounds from the Xianyuan sword's bombardment. In terms of quality, the Dark Demon sword was slightly better than the Demon's Kiss, but there was still a huge gap between it and the Xianyuan sword. It was also because of this that such a situation occurred. In the face of the meteor chasing the moon, he could no longer break free from Chi Yu's lock on him. Hence, he could not even dodge. How could the Xianyuan 8 laws be easily blocked? The golden light finally ended after the last dozen attacks, and Chi Yu's figure reappeared in midair. The tall man's face looked even colder, and the Dark Demon's sword in his hand was trembling slightly. Just like the Xianyuan sword, this kind of super demon weapon also had a soul. In the face of the king's aura of the Xianyuan sword, it actually felt like retreating. With a flash of light, the tall man retracted his Dark Demon sword. At this moment, there was an additional wound on the left side of his face. At the last moment, he still could not completely block the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. Although the injury was not serious, it was the greatest humiliation for him. I don't know how many years it has been since anyone could hurt my body. Brat, you actually made me bleed today. Only by using the cruelest method to torture you to death can I wash away the humiliation I have suffered. The fallen angel, Lucifer, officially challenges you to the cruelest of challenges. I will not stop until one of us dies. Although Chi Yu was not very familiar with Western mythology, he had heard of the fallen angel, Lucifer. Lucifer used to be the archangel of heaven, and he was the leader of the many archangels. Later, for some unknown reason, he chose to fall and join the resistance camp, acknowledging the great demon king, Satan, as his master. And this legendary figure was actually floating in front of him at this moment. Unlike the goddess Athena, Yamu was an inherited deity. After all, she was still human. However, the Lucifer in front of him was a real demon, and a top-grade demon at that. No wonder he had such great power. Chapter 248. Lucifer snorted coldly and said, "Your Highness, we people in hell can't be merciful. Don't you know that? If your father finds out, I'm afraid he won't forgive you." Lung glanced at Chi Yu. She knew that although Chi Yu's attack power was very powerful, he must be an arrow at the end of its flight after receiving her palm's strike and increasing his energy with all his might. Lucifer was really angry. In hell, apart from her father, Lucifer was the most powerful. Because her father doted on her, Lucifer became her guardian angel. If the fallen angel Lucifer really wanted to kill someone, he would definitely do it by hook or by crook. Moreover, with his strength, Chi Yu, who was at the end of his flight, would definitely not be able to withstand another thunderous blow. Ling'er's judgment was right. After forcefully using the meteor chasing the moon, Chi Yu's chest was already full of annoyance. The attack power of Ling'er's previous palm strike was fully displayed, and she had to use such a huge amount of energy before she could fully heal him. The injuries he had suffered previously in his chest and abdomen had completely erupted. He could only barely condense the remaining energy to temporarily maintain the golden sun armor. Not to mention Lucifer, even if Ling'er attacked him now, he might not be able to deal with it. Recently, he had faced several top powerhouses in succession, which made Chi Yu realize that his strength was still very insufficient. Even if he could still use the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Big Dipper realm technique, it was impossible to save the current situation. However, even so, when Ling'er pleaded for him to Lucifer, he still had two feelings in his heart. One was that he had a better impression of Ling'er. So what if she was a princess of hell? As long as she was sincere to him, he could treat her as a friend. The other reason was that Ling Jin's pleading for him had completely aroused the arrogance in Chi Yu's heart. So what if she was Lucifer? Could demons not be killed? Chi Yu's arrogance caused a strong desire to fight to rise in his heart. Facing a strong enemy, he knew that if he didn't use his last resort, he wouldn't be able to escape today. A faint silver light shone from Chi Yu's right arm, causing even the golden light of the sun-moon golden sun armor to dim a little. An enormous amount of energy suddenly surged out, and the Qilin figure appeared once again. Under Chi Yu's intentional activation of the Qilin's essence, the sun-moon golden sun armor was only maintained on the surface, but the energy was no longer as integrated as before. Lucifer ignored Chi Yu, who was gathering energy, and said coldly, "Your Royal Highness, please don't interfere with my decision. This is the dignity of a fallen angel. Even if His Majesty Satan is here, he has no right to stop me from reclaiming my glory. Besides, this person in front of me must be destroyed. This is extremely important for our hell's future march into this world." Ling'er was very anxious. When she saw the energy collision between Chi Yu and Lucifer just now, she had already made a decision in her heart. It was not because of Chi Yu's strength, but because of Chi Yu's retracting sword. When she wanted to kill him, he could still do that. It was not wrong for her to like such a man. If he really died, she would definitely regret it for the rest of her life. Therefore, when Lucifer was about to attack again, Ling'er immediately stood up and wanted to use her identity as the Princess of Hell to stop him. However, who was Lucifer? Although he was Ling'er's guardian angel, his status in hell was absolutely transcendent. Even Satan had to treat him with respect. Chi Yu's Xianyuan sword had already posed a considerable threat to him. Once this young man's strength increased to the same level as his, with such an Eastern artifact, he would no longer be his opponent. Moreover, he had injured him. How could he tolerate such humiliation? With a wave of his left hand, a ball of black energy enveloped Ling'er's delicate body. Even her ability to speak was sealed. In the face of absolute power, Ling'er had no chance of resisting Lucifer at all. With a flash of light, he had already sent Ling'er out. However, at this moment, Lucifer was suddenly shocked because he clearly saw that Chi Yu's right arm had turned completely silver. Moreover, the right arm that was holding the sword had expanded by at least a third of its original size. The energy that had dimmed after using the moon chasing after the stars burned again, and this time, it was much stronger than before. That's right. Facing a strong enemy like Lucifer, Chi Yu was already prepared to use his ultimate Kirin arm. Of course, the ultimate Kirin arm was not enough to destroy Lucifer. However, if he used the ultimate Kirin arm to push the Xianyuan sword, the effect would be different. According to Chi Yu's calculations, if he used the ultimate Kirin arm with his current strength that surpassed 7 clouds, the effect would definitely not be the same as when he had destroyed the golden-winged eagle. Once he activated the Xianyuan 8 laws, he would at least be able to use the power of the fourth technique with his remaining strength. In that case, with the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, even if he couldn't kill this guy in front of him, he would at least be able to severely injure him and make him pay the price for underestimating him. As a man, how could he struggle at death's door under the pleading of a girl? The light in Lucifer's eyes became serious again. The silver light that kept twisting around Chi Yu's body and his gaze that was unafraid of death had already made Lucifer feel alarmed. However, at this time, for the sake of his honor and dignity, he would definitely not retreat. He was also confident that he could destroy this young man in front of him. The 8 wings spread out at the same time, and massive dark energy formed a spiral-shaped domain that enveloped a radius of a few square kilometers. Lucifer was also going to use his most powerful power. At this moment, Chi Yu's constantly expanding silver energy suddenly retracted and did not continue to grow stronger. Moreover, even the energy aura on his body kept dissipating, and the sun-golden armor disappeared. When Lucifer saw this, he could not help but feel a little amused. He thought to himself, could it be that this kid's energy is insufficient? Was he just trying to intimidate me just now? If that's really the case, then you're dead. Lucifer had always thought that he would definitely win, but Chi Yu did not think so. When he was about to use the ultimate Kirin arm, a deep and domineering voice rang out in his heart. Are you going to use the ultimate Kirin technique? If that's the case, your strength will not be able to recover for a very long time. No matter what, I, the Bull Demon King, am also a bull from the east. I once promised to do 3 things for you. This can be considered the first. Hearing the Bull Demon King's voice, Chi Yu could not help but be overjoyed. He secretly scolded himself for being muddle-headed. There was still the Bull Demon King. He was not Lucifer's match. As the strongest demon god in the East, he would probably be able to put up a fight even if Satan came personally. The Bull Demon King had once promised him 3 things. Although he would use up one of them, it was still much better than losing all the energy in his right arm. Because of the Bull Demon King's reminder, Chi Yu gave up on the idea of using the ultimate Kirin arm. He immediately retracted the released energy and replied to the Bull Demon King, "All right, I'll leave everything to you." When he dispersed the energy of the ultimate Kirin arm, the injury on his chest seemed to hurt even more. The energy waves in his body also became much weaker. From the start of the battle with Lung'er until now, he had been constantly on guard. Now that he had relaxed, he naturally could not maintain the effect of the sun-golden armor. Of course, Chi Yu also had his own thoughts. He did not hope that the Bull Demon King would kill Lucifer. Instead, he hoped that the Bull Demon King and Lucifer would both be injured. That would be the best situation. If that happened, not only would he be able to kill a fallen angel, but he would also be able to completely clear the hidden problems in his body. After all, the Bull Demon King was in his body. To Chi Yu, it had always been like a thorn in his back. If he could solve this problem, he would undoubtedly be the happiest. Seeing that Chi Yu's energy had dispersed, Lucifer did not want to waste any more time. After all, Lung'er was still very powerful. If he wanted to use energy to control her, it would consume a lot of Lucifer's energy. Moreover, Lung'er was Satan's daughter after all. Although he had not done anything wrong, it was better to end it as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary trouble. A huge amount of dark energy gathered, and Lucifer floated up. His tall and high-spirited figure appeared in front of Chi Yu in the blink of an eye, and his palm went straight for Chi Yu's chest. In order to solve the problem in an instant, he did not even use an energy attack. He did not want to give Chi Yu any more chances. Just when Lucifer thought that he was about to solve the problem and that Lung'er had already closed her eyes, a domineering voice suddenly rang out. "Do you really think that there is no one else in the East?" What greeted Lucifer was a huge fist, and an incomparably surging domineering aura met Lucifer's palm that was filled with dark energy. Amidst the loud bang, Chi Yu's body used the force to retreat far away, and his huge body that was 10 meters tall suddenly floated in the air. Lucifer, on the other hand, was sent flying. He spread the 8 wings on his back and barely managed to balance his body. He was shocked to find that a giant had appeared in Chi Yu's previous position. It had a ferocious face, an incomparably strong body, and a pair of super big horns on its head. Its huge fierce eyes were staring at him, and its hands were clasped together, making a kind of bone-grinding sound that made one's teeth ache. "Who are you?" Lucifer resisted the surging blood and Chi in his body, and asked in shock. In order to destroy Chi Yu just now, he had used more than 80% of his energy to attack with his palm. However, when it came into contact with the huge fist, it was as if it had hit a mountain made of fine gold. It could not move the other party at all, and the domineering energy directly sent his body flying back. The domineering energy waves had completely covered all the directions that he could sense. Bull Demon King snorted coldly and said, "Are all you Westerners like this? Last time it was a white-haired one, and this time it's a black-haired one. Aren't you all beasts? Who cares who I am? I'm from the East anyway. Little guy, if I don't beat you up today, you won't know why flowers are so red. What did you say to Chi Yu just now? You want to leave his corpse intact, right? Today I'll turn you into a bird stick." Hearing Bull Demon King's words that were full of Jianghu aura, Chi Yu, who had just retreated, could not help but burst into laughter. When did this old bull learn these things? Moreover, he said it so naturally. He immediately cooperated and asked, "What is a bird stick?" Bull Demon King said proudly, "Isn't that simple? A bird stick is to pluck out all his bird feathers and then tear off all the extra things. Only a bare pole is left, isn't that a bird stick?" Lucifer was already trembling with anger because of Bull Demon King. He subconsciously cursed in Western countries. *CK Bull Demon King was stunned for a moment. He had been in Chi Yu's body for some time. With his ability to accept things when he was in the West, he more or less knew a few words of English, especially when it came to cursing. He snorted disdainfully and said contemptuously, "Little guy, you want to *CK me with your morals?" As he said that, he turned around halfway and shook his huge butt at Lucifer, saying, "It's not that I'm looking down on you, but your bird is definitely not long enough." Chi Yu was already speechless. When did Bull Demon King become so lascivious? Moreover, his level of lasciviousness was definitely comparable to Hu Guang and the rest. Lucifer's face was already filled with black lines. He could no longer hold back the rage in his heart. He had also forgotten that the huge guy in front of him was much stronger than him. In a flash, he rushed towards Bull Demon King. The dark demon sword appeared once again, and a huge black hole appeared in the circle of the dark demon sword. The crazy suction force was definitely not something that Lung'er's dark energy could compare to. Bull Demon King pursed his lips. The dark energy might have a great impact on Chi Yu, forcing him to carefully maintain his energy. However, Bull Demon King was different from Chi Yu. His energy contained a certain amount of dark energy, but it was not as pure as Lucifer's dark energy. There was also an abnormally evil energy wave, and an incomparably strong and domineering aura. That huge energy wave was definitely not something that Lucifer could resist even if he wanted to. A powerful energy wave appeared directly in front of Lucifer. When he activated the Dark Demon Sword with all his might to conjure a black hole to swallow the Bull Demon King's body, the Bull Demon King only made one move. He spread his huge arms to the sides of his body, completely giving up any resistance and allowing the black hole to envelop his body. "Little guy, didn't you want to devour me? Fine. I'll let you devour as much as you want. However, your hole is too small, I'm afraid it can't withstand my huge size." The black hole swept out and Bull Demon King's body was completely devoured. Huge amounts of dark energy filled the air. Chi-Yu looked at everything that was happening in front of him in shock. He definitely did not want to miss out on the battle between these two super strong people. He was very clear that Bull Demon King was definitely not easy to deal with. From the moment Bull Demon King appeared, he could tell that although Lucifer's energy was huge and could devour him to death, when facing Bull Demon King, Lucifer's energy was only slightly stronger than Chi-Yu's and was still unable to resist. The feeling that Bull Demon King gave Chi-Yu was that he was completely unfathomable. He really did not know how strong this old bull's energy was. Indeed, just as Lucifer heaved a sigh of relief and the resentful gaze in his eyes began to turn into excitement, a layer of dense purple electric light suddenly appeared all over his body. In an instant, not only did the excitement that had just risen up in him disappear completely, at the same time, extreme fear appeared in his eyes. He almost instinctively retreated quickly, and right at the position where Bull Demon King had been devoured, a thunderous sound rang out. A crack in the space appeared and Bull Demon King's huge body directly stepped out. Under the influence of the aura, Lucifer let out a muffled grunt and spat out a mouthful of black blood mist. His body swayed unsteadily. Just as he was about to use his domain ability, he suddenly felt his entire body suddenly sink. It was as if a huge pressure of 3 mountains had appeared on his body, immediately interrupting the activation of his energy. That huge body appeared in front of him at an unbelievable speed. Bull Demon King's giant spirit palm was already coming towards him. In a panic, Lucifer could only concentrate all his energy on the dark demon sword. At the same time, he retracted his 8 wings to protect his body in an attempt to block Bull Demon King's attack. But how strong was Bull Demon King's strength? With a boom, Lucifer's body was directly sent flying, smashing into the mountain beside him like a cannonball. Bull Demon King laughed. "I told you, this birdman's hole is too small, it can't withstand my huge size. I'm going to take a look. How much energy do you have left to withstand my attack again?" As he spoke, he had already flown towards the hole that had been smashed open. Chi-Yu watched as Bull Demon King beat up Lucifer, exclaiming in his heart. He also did not expect Bull Demon King to be so strong. The evenly matched battle that he had anticipated did not happen at all. In front of Bull Demon King, Lucifer did not even have the ability to withstand a single blow. Actually, what Chi-Yu did not know was that although Bull Demon King was strong, the gap between him and Lucifer was not that huge. The reason why he could achieve such a result was firstly that Lucifer had already expended a lot of energy under Chi-Yu's meteor-chasing moon attack. Secondly, it was Bull Demon King's cunning. He naturally understood that Chi-Yu was wary of him. Hence, when he went into battle, he immediately used his strongest ability, Giant Spirit Force. Although there were no visible changes on the surface, Bull Demon King had concentrated all his energy to explode. Once Giant Spirit Force was activated, just like Chi-Yu's Solar Lunisolar Crimson Gold armor, it could increase the strength of its original attack by more than double in a short period of time. Moreover, Lucifer was angered by Bull Demon King's words. In actual combat, he could only use about 70% of his strength. Under such circumstances, he was immediately at a disadvantage in the hands of Bull Demon King. Chi-Yu, who was trying his best to heal his injuries, felt his heart tighten. Ling'er had already appeared beside him. However, Ling'er was not here to attack him. Her long pink hair draped over her shoulders. Ling'er looked a little disheveled. Her eyes revealed a trace of a pleading look. "Chi-Yu, I beg you, let Uncle Lucifer go. He is only making things difficult for you to protect me. Uncle Lucifer watched me grow up. I have always treated him as my real uncle. I'm begging you." Of course, Chi-Yu did not want to let Lucifer go. It was not because Lucifer wanted to kill him. Ling'er had already said that hell would very likely descend upon the human world soon. Lucifer was the strongest person in hell, second only to Satan. Even Chi-Yu could not resist him. Once he really led the Hell Army to attack the East, such a strong opponent would cause great damage to the East. That was definitely not what Chi-Yu wanted to see. However, looking at Ling'er's sorrowful face, Chi-Yu could not bear to reject her. After all, when Lucifer wanted to kill him, Ling'er had even given up her dignity as a princess of hell to beg him. Although her goal today was to kill him, before Lucifer appeared, Ling'er did not really have the intention to kill him. "Ling'er, you have to understand that I cannot control that old bull," Chi-Yu said helplessly. Ling'er said anxiously, "But didn't you summon him? Ming Ming saw that he was separated from your body just now. It turns out that you actually have such a powerful combat partner. Chi-Yu, I beg you, let Uncle Lucifer go. I promise that I will never come to the East again to make things difficult for you." Chi-Yu's eyes flashed, and he said, "Then can you guarantee that when hell descends upon the human world, it will not be a threat to the East?" "This, Chi-Yu, you should know that this is not something that I can decide. I beg you, let Uncle Lucifer go. Whatever you want, as long as I can give it to you, I am willing. Even if it's my body, I can." Since Ling'er had already said this much, Chi-Yu knew that he could not harden his heart to reject her. He sighed and said, "All right, consider it as repayment for the time you saved me. From now on, we do not owe each other anything. If the Hell Realm really wants to attack the East in the future, you should also carefully consider whether you have the strength to do so. Bull Demon King, in the East, is only one of the strong. Even if your father is here, he may not be able to defeat him." Chi-Yu could not help but feel a lot more relieved that he could repay the debt he owed. At least, when he faced Ling'er again in the future, he no longer owed her anything. If the two of them were destined to be enemies in the end, Chi-Yu could also let go and do whatever he wanted. He would no longer have any psychological burden. Tears flowed down her face, and Ling'er slowly lowered her head. She knew that there was an insurmountable gap between her and Chi-Yu. "Old bull, stop!" Chi-Yu shouted, and along with the fluctuation of his mental strength, he directly transmitted it to the depths of Bull Demon King's mind. At this time, Bull Demon King had already carried Lucifer out of the hole that was smashed. He had always been a man of his word. Under the incomparably tyrannical energy lock, he directly tore off 3 of Lucifer's feathers, causing the fallen angel to let out a miserable cry. Black blood splattered in the air. Bull Demon King turned around and looked at Chi-Yu. "Have you really decided to let him go?" Chi-Yu nodded and said, "From today onwards I no longer owe them anything. I don't owe them anything anymore. Let them go." The Bull Demon King chuckled and said, "Helping you fight is your first request to me. Then, let me help you. Then, asking me to stop now should be your second request to me. I can let him go, but I only owe you one thing." Hearing him say that, Chi-Yu could not help but get angry. "F***ck, old bull, if you want to say that, then fine, I'll make my third request now. It's very simple, my last request is that you must do 3 more things for me." Bull Demon King was stunned for a moment, and said angrily, "What do you mean?" Chi-Yu said proudly, "What about you? So what? Since you can act shamelessly, why can't I?" He was a ruffian. He had seen this kind of trick many times in the past. Bull Demon King had no choice but to compromise. He casually threw Lucifer to the side like he was throwing trash, and said, all right, just one thing. Old Bull is going back, you do as you see fit." With a flash of light, he directly returned to Chi-Yu's body. At this time, his giant spirit body's ability could not last for long. Ever since Lucifer became an archangel in the heaven realm, he had never suffered such a huge loss. 3 wings. It was extremely difficult to recover. The heart-wrenching pain was not as good as the strong sense of humiliation in his heart. He stood up from the ground covered in blood and looked at Chi-Yu. His originally handsome face had already become somewhat distorted. At this time, Chi-Yu's injuries had already recovered a lot. Holding the Xianyuan divine sword in his hand, he looked at Lucifer fearlessly. With Lucifer's current injuries, it was impossible for him to pose any threat. Lumiere almost begged Lucifer, "Forget it, uncle, let's leave this place." Lucifer finally looked at Chi-Yu coldly, and suddenly disappeared in the dim black light. The last look he left behind clearly told Chi-Yu that he would return one day. The hatred between the Guardian of the East and the underworld had already been deeply rooted. The next time he came, Lucifer would definitely not be alone. Looking at Lucifer's disappearing figure, Lumiere heaved a sigh of relief. The 3 pairs of black wings behind her disappeared. Standing beside Chi-Yu, her aura seemed a little weak. It was not a weakness in energy but in spirit. "Lumiere!" Chi-Yu called out to her. Lumiere turned around and looked at Chi-Yu blankly. She knew that it was no longer possible between her and Chi-Yu. Zhao Feng and the underworld had also become mortal enemies. Even she did not know what would happen in the future. After all, she was not the ruler of the underworld. With Lucifer's position in Satan's heart, Satan would not let Chi-Yu off after suffering such a big loss this time. "We're still friends." Chi-Yu stretched out his hand to Lumiere and said with certainty, "No matter what happens between the underworld and us in the future, no matter what happens in the future, at least we're still friends now." Lumiere was stunned for a moment. She looked at Chi-Yu with the same gentle gaze that Chi-Yu had when they first met. Her pink eyes flickered, and she suddenly reached out to grab Chi-Yu. Her delicate body rushed forward and rushed into Chi-Yu's embrace, kissing his lips. Chi-Yu was stunned for a moment. Lumiere's fragrant lips were not as cold as he had imagined. Those warm and soft lips carried a faint sound. Lumiere's alluring body trembled slightly in his embrace. "Be careful, Chi-Yu. The underworld will not fail. There is no power that can stop us. When the West falls, the East will definitely be our target. At that time, everything will not be under my control. My father will personally come to the human world." Chi-Yu's heart trembled. Was Satan going to personally come to the human world? However, could the overlord of the underworld really break through the plane and come to his world? At this moment, he could not help but think of the catastrophe that Yamu had mentioned. At that time, Yamu had said that it was a catastrophe for the entire human race, not just the West. Could it be that she was referring to the arrival of Satan? Lumiere slowly straightened her body. The temperature from Chi-Yu's body made her feel very warm, but it was only for a moment. With sadness and a strong sense of regret and loss, she took a deep look at Chi-Yu, completely imprinting this man's appearance into her mind. She floated up, her pink dress fluttering in the air. The Princess of Hell had already unknowingly left. Chi-Yu watched as Lumiere's figure disappeared. How could he not feel a little disappointed in his heart? Chapter 249. At this moment, Chi-Yu was in a bad mood. It was not because of Lumiere, but because of Wen-Ting. When he used the solar lunisolar golden armor the previous 2 times, Wen-Ting was awake because of the huge amount of energy transferred. But this time, her soul was still in a deep sleep. Wen-Ting's soul was different from Xuanyuan's soul, Bull Demon King, Little Pring, and Xieji in Chi-Yu's body. As for the others, even if they were in a deep sleep, Chi-Yu could clearly feel their existence. But because Wen-Ting had completely given up on her physical body, she appeared directly in the form of her own energy. Therefore, her soul was very weak. Chi-Yu did not even know where she was hiding in his body. Where was Wen-Ting? What was she doing? Why didn't she appear even though he had enough energy? Was there something wrong with her soul? Or was it because he had gradually absorbed the energy that she had injected into his body, causing her soul to be damaged? Because when Ting did not appear, Chi-Yu could not help but let his imagination run wild. Towards Wen-Ting, other than a deep love, he also felt a strong sense of guilt. If it was not because of him, Wen-Ting would not have died. Therefore, among the most important women in Chi-Yu's heart, Wen-Ting was clearly ranked first. Tianxiang Mountain was one of the famous scenic spots in the capital city. Therefore, it was much greener than other places in the capital city. Here, where the aura of nature was relatively abundant, Chi Yu used about an hour to completely heal the injuries that Lung Er had inflicted on him. As his body recovered, he understood that Lung Er must have held back at the last moment when she struck him with her palm. Otherwise, even if he was also injured, his injuries would definitely be much more serious. Thinking of this, Chi Yu's feelings towards Lung Er changed slightly, and he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Regardless of which faction they belonged to, it didn't necessarily mean that they would appear according to their own faction. Just like Yamu and Lung Er, Yamu was the successor of goddess Athena. However, in order to improve his strength, didn't she give up the little bit of relationship he had built up with great difficulty? Even if she didn't kill him in the end out of guilt and regret, but her actions were completely unlike the gods that humans worship. What about Lung Er? With her identity as the Princess of Hell, Ming Ming had already expressed that it was impossible for her to cooperate with Hell, so she should have gotten rid of her. However, from the beginning to the end of the battle, she had held back. Even when Lucifer decided to kill her, Lung Er appeared in time to stop him. Can you really call such a girl a demon? No, at least in Chi Yu's mind, the answer was definitely no. A faint light flickered. Chi Yu floated up from the ground. It was time to go back. He didn't tell Snow Girl before sneaking out for such a long time. She must have been very worried. What Chi Yu didn't know was that Snow Girl wasn't the only one who was worried about him. His parents had also stayed in the Dragonfield courtyard, waiting for his return. Taking out his spare clothes from the Kirin Pearl, Chi Yu was about to fly back to the Dragonfield courtyard when the phone in his pocket rang. He took it out and was surprised to find that there were more than 10 missed calls on his phone, and all of them were from the same number. It was the one that was calling him now. He pressed the answer button. Who is it? Looking for me so impatiently. Chi Yu never had the habit of memorizing phone numbers. He thought that the person who kept calling him should be Snow Girl. However, unexpectedly, a kind voice came from the other side of the phone. Chi Yu? It's really not easy to find you. Master, is that you? That's right, the person who called was Master Zagtalu, who had already returned to Tibet. Yes, it's me, Chi Yu. Do you have time recently? If you do, you'd better come to Tibet. I have something to tell you. Although Zagru's voice was very calm, Chi Yu could still hear some of his emotional anxiety. Even with Zagru's Buddha nature cultivation, this kind of situation could not help but make Chi Yu's heart sink. He said, Master, what's so urgent? Zagru said, It's not convenient to talk about this over the phone. You should talk about it when you get to Tibet. If you don't have time, I'll fly to the capital to find you. Chi Yu said without hesitation, No need, Master. I'll go find you. I'll leave now and try to reach Tibet tomorrow morning. After listening to Zagru's words, Chi Yu knew that this matter was not simple. Otherwise, Zagru would not have spoken so mysteriously. The privacy of things like mobile phones was actually not strong, especially with Chi Yu's current identity. His mobile phone was likely to be monitored by the state, so Zagru had asked him to go to Tibet in person. Chi Yu did not delay too much. After hanging up the phone, he directly used Kirin's invisibility skill to restrain his aura. Because the previous battle had consumed a lot of energy in his body, he did not fly by himself. Of course, it was impossible for him to take a plane. How could taking a plane be faster and more convenient than sitting on Little Peng? That was a real private plane. With the remaining energy, he expanded the effect of Kirin's invisibility to the size of Little Peng's body. Under its load, he quickly headed in the direction of Tibet. Chi Yu was not worried that he would get lost. Although he did not know the exact location of Tibet, it was not a problem to find the general direction. As long as he got within a certain range of Master Zelu, he could directly find the Master based on the aura between the two of them. As Chi Yu flew towards Tibet, he did not forget Snow Girl. Sitting on Little Peng's back, He dialed the number of the Dragonfield courtyard. Snow Girl? It's me. Ah. Chiyu, where are you? Snow Girl asked anxiously on the other side of the phone. Chiyu smiled and said, What's wrong? We haven't seen each other for a while and you already miss me? Snow Girl said unhappily, Well, now is not the time to joke. Come back quickly. Uncle and Auntie are waiting for you. Sitting on Little Ping's back, Chiyu could not help but be stunned when he heard Snow Girl's words. Uncle and Auntie? Could it be them? After a moment of silence, Chiyu asked, Have the results of their tests come out? Snow Girl said, They came out yesterday, but because you were cultivating yesterday, Uncle and Auntie did not disturb you. That's why Uncle and Auntie didn't disturb you. Who knew you would leave the monastery as soon as you finished cultivating? Where are you now? When can you come back? Although Snow Girl did not say it clearly. However, from her words, Chiyu already knew that Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai had obviously recognized his identity through science. He was silent. At this time, even Chiyu did not understand his own feelings. Being recognized by his parents should have been an extremely happy thing, but he did not know why. He just could not be happy. Perhaps it was because there were too many twists and turns before they truly recognized each other. Chiyu, are you listening? Snow Girl clearly felt that something was wrong with Chiyu's breath. Chiyu nodded. He said, I'm listening. Snow Girl, I can't go back yet. Let them go back first. I have an urgent matter to attend to in Tibet. I didn't know when I would come back. Tell them not to worry. When I return, I will naturally look for them. Hearing Chiyu's words, Snow Girl couldn't help but have a strange feeling in her heart. Was he trying to escape? No, Chiyu was not a person who was used to running away. Even though the incident with Wen Ting was a huge blow to him, he could still pull himself together. With the development of the Zodiac Guardian God's power as the source, he found his goal again. What could it be? Could there be some big trouble in Tibet? Chiyu, what are you going to Tibet for? Chiyu said with a wry smile, It's nothing big. It's just that Master asked me to go over and said that he has something to discuss with me. You also know Master's position among the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. I must agree to his request. You deal with the affairs of Kirin Group at home. I will come back as soon as possible. Snow Girl tentatively asked, Why don't you use the phone to talk to Uncle and Auntie? They have been waiting for you all night. Hearing Snow Girl's words, Chiyu's heart seemed to skip a beat, but he still refused. Forget it. Everything will wait for me to come back. Help me tell them to pay more attention to their health. Bring some of the fruits produced by our company back for them. I think it should be helpful for their health. After all, they have worked hard for their careers all their lives. I'm hanging up. I might put the phone in the Kirin Pearl, so don't call me again. After saying that, Chiyu hung up. It was not that he was heartless. He was afraid that once he spoke to Chi Tianlei and his wife, he would immediately rush back to the Dragonfield courtyard. Although they had already recognized his identity, they still needed a certain amount of time to carefully test how to deal with the problems between them. Chiyu did not want to see Chi Tianlei and his wife do anything that he could not accept because of a moment of impulse. At the same time, he also needed to calm down. At least, before he really recognized his parents, Chiyu hoped that all the negative emotions in his heart could disappear. He doesn't want to talk to us? Ing Xiaodai looked at Snow Girl with tears in her eyes. Looking at her full of sadness, Snow Girl could not help but sigh softly and comforted her. Auntie, don't be like this. Chiyu is not a person who likes to hold a grudge. What's more, you are his family. He already understands what I mean, but he has something urgent to do now. He has to go to Tibet, so it's impossible for him to come back. I think he may also need to calm down. When he comes back from Tibet, everything will be fine. Ing Xiaodai turned around and threw herself into her husband's arms. She choked and said, It's all our fault. We hurt the child's heart. He has suffered so much, but we still treat him like that. Tianlei, what should we do now? Feeling his wife's sorrow, Qi Tianlei calmed down and said, Xiao Dai, Qi Yu is a sensible child. Lady Xuannu is right. He needs time to calm himself down and not bear a grudge against us. So many years have passed. You also know everything he has encountered in the past. Now let's wait quietly for our son to return to us. We will definitely make up for everything he has lost with all our heart. Ing Xiaodai said sadly, but will he really give us a chance to make it up to him? Qi Tianlei seemed to have made up his mind. If you are really worried, why don't we go straight to Tibet to find him? Ing Xiaodai was stunned for a moment, but she still shook her head. This strong woman was still very rational after waking up from the sadness of family. Forget it, you're right. Let him calm down. Maybe he went to Tibet to avoid us. Why should we force him to be so anxious? Snow Girl, I'll call you Shuer. I'll have to trouble you to inform us when Qiyu comes back, okay? Who were Qi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai? How could they not see the relationship between Snow Girl and Qiyu? In their hearts, they had already regarded Snow Girl as their daughter-in-law. Without their son, they had become even closer to her. It was as if they wanted to release all their feelings for Qiyu on Snow Girl. From Qi Tianlei and his wife, Snow Girl seemed to feel the scene of her whole family living happily on the snowy mountain. How wonderful that was! Unfortunately, everything was gone now. However, wasn't Qiyu's family also her family? Uncle, Auntie, don't worry. As soon as Qiyu comes back, I will definitely inform you immediately. No matter what happens to Qiyu, I will let you see him before we leave. Qi Tianlei was stunned and said, Leave? Where are you going? Abroad? Snow Girl shook her head and said, Uncle, you should already know that Qiyu is not an ordinary person. He has a lot of things to do, a lot of things that ordinary people can't imagine. So, after he comes back from Tibet, as long as our group's business is on track, we have to leave again. But you don't have to worry too much. After we leave this time, we will be back in the middle of January at the latest, just in time for the Lunar New Year of the Yanhuang Republic. Qi Tianlei sighed and said, Contributing to the country is the responsibility of our generation of men. However, I'm afraid that what Qiyu is doing is a little too dangerous. When he comes back, it seems that I have to talk to him. Snow Girl smiled and said, Uncle, you may not fully understand, but what Qiyu does is not only under the orders of the country, but also because he has to do it. There was a movie that said that the more powerful a person is, the greater his responsibility. Qiyu is like this. He has strength far beyond ordinary people, so he has to do many things that ordinary people can't do. This is not an order, but a mission. It is something that he has to do. Uncle, Auntie, you are also tired. Go back and rest early. Qiyu said that you must pay attention to your health. Qiyu asked me to bring these fruits back for you to taste. Although the price of our company's products is a little higher, they are indeed original fruits, which are extremely beneficial to the human body. As long as Uncle and Auntie need them, I will send some to you every week in the future. As she spoke, Snow Girl picked up a VIP gift box produced by Kirin Group and handed it to the bodyguard behind Qi Tianlei. Qi Tianlei and his wife didn't have time to pay attention to the fruits now. Their minds were completely focused on Qiyu, who was far away. However, Snow Girl's action was also equivalent to a reminder to them. On one hand, it proved that Qiyu didn't bear a grudge against them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent them fruit. On the other hand, it also reminded them that the company established by their son had just started operating. Since their son was not here, then they would help him in this aspect. At least when their son came back and found out that the company's performance was good, his mood would always be better. Qi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai said goodbye to Snow Girl. They got into their luxury car and left Dragonfield Courtyard. Tianlei, I want to help you, Kirin Group. Ing Xiaodai couldn't wait to put forward her idea as soon as she closed the car door. Looking at his wife's anxious look, Qi Tianlei couldn't help but laugh. What are you laughing at? Ing Xiaodai rebuked. Qi Tianlei said, Xiaodai, you are indeed my good wife. This time, we have a tacit understanding again. Xiaodai finally understood. So you also thought of it. Qi Tianlei's invisible majesty would only completely disappear in front of his wife. He laughed and said, If I can't even think of this, I don't deserve to be the chairman of the Golden Valley Group's board of directors. This time, we not only want to help Qiyu. At the same time, we can't let him know. Only in this way can we be considered to be doing the right thing. Xiaodai was stunned, but she quickly understood. She smiled and said, At least you have some brains. The smart couple thought at the same time. From the few times they met, Qiyu was obviously a person with strong self-esteem. If they helped Kirin Group in all aspects, it might have the opposite effect. After all, anyone who started a business wanted to see their own success step by step instead of relying on the strength of others. Only in this way could something truly belong to them. Qi Tianlei took out his satellite phone and dialed a number. He said calmly, Immediately investigate the products that Kirin Group has just released, including all product analysis and product value estimate. I want to see the report on my desk before noon tomorrow. The more detailed, the better. As the leader of a large company, Qi Tianlei was very serious. Even if he wanted to help his own son secretly, he had to first find out the value of the products launched by Kirin Group this time. Only in this way could he better decide on a helping strategy. Qi Tianlei and Xiaodai quietly got busy for Qiyu in the capital. Meanwhile, Qiyu was sitting on the back of the golden-winged eagle, Little Peng, and was getting closer and closer to Tibet. Little Peng's full speed made even Qiyu sigh at his inferiority. It could be seen how fast it was. At least, ordinary civil aircraft were absolutely unable to compare with Little Peng. Probably only those high-tech fighter jets could compare with it. Qiyu restrained his mind and released his spiritual force to feel the aura of Master Zagru that could appear at any time. At the same time, he also used his spiritual force to perceive the energy in the air and used Kirin's ascending cloud technique to restore his thundercloud force. Through this battle with Lungair and Lucifer, Qiyu had a deeper understanding of his own energy. He found that although the source of nature was a kind of neutral and peaceful energy, and could also control plants to a certain extent, it was still a special form of energy. Moreover, it was also one of the easiest energies in the world to absorb and transform. And this kind of energy itself was not ideal for direct application. Energy like the source of nature must be combined with other energies in order to exert its greatest effect. For example, this time, after Qiyu's water thundercloud force was upgraded to the 8-cloud realm, he thought of combining it with the source of nature. The final result was a great surprise to him. The speed of his own healing had increased by at least 3 times. Moreover, it was the kind of treatment that ignored all injuries. Not only internal injuries, but even external injuries could also play a huge role. What did this prove? It proved that the water thundercloud force had undergone a qualitative change under the support of the source of nature. During the flight, Qiyu restored his thundercloud force while testing the effect of the fusion of the source of nature and his other kinds of thundercloud force. As a result, he was surprised to find that when a single kind of thundercloud force was fused with the source of nature, it was like a flame meeting oxygen, and the instantaneous effect was extremely amazing. However, there was also a limit. That was, when the source of nature increased, it could only increase one kind of energy. Once the energy appeared in a mixed form, although it would also have a supplementary effect, but the huge effect would disappear naturally. This was why Qiyu hadn't noticed it before. After returning to Dragonfield Courtyard from London, Zagru had a heart-to-heart talk with him, which reignited Qiyu's determination to pay attention to the application of his various thundercloud force. Before this, when Qiyu attacked, most of the time, he would choose to fuse several of his thundercloud force or use Kirin's origin energy and thundercloud force together, so he didn't discover the mystery of the natural source energy. At this moment, Chi-Yu couldn't help but be overjoyed. When a single thundercloud force was enhanced by the origin of nature, its effect would be magnified several times. In this case, the effect of a single thundercloud force would not be inferior to Kirin's origin energy, even when compared to Kirin's arm. It wouldn't be inferior by much. Moreover, by using thundercloud force in this way, under the stimulation of the origin of nature, he would have twice the result with half the effort when he cultivated. He could completely achieve the goal of improving thundercloud force in a shorter time. Since that's the case, why not? As the mystery of the origin of nature was comprehended by Chi-Yu. In his mind, a variety of ways to use the origin of nature to supplement his own energy began to appear. From these methods, Chi-Yu also got more and more inspiration. It was because of the enlightenment during this period of flight. It allowed him to truly enter the realm close to the God level, allowing him to really get close to the mystery of the four auspicious clouds in Kirin. Little Peng's flying speed was really terrifying. When Chi-Yu arrived in Tibet, the sky was still dark. With the guidance of his mental power, Chi-Yu quickly found the location of the holy Buddha temple. However, he also clearly found that there was a huge Buddhist power guarding the temple. There was a powerful Buddhist power protecting it, preventing his mental power from penetrating it. But with Master Zagru's aura, it was enough for him. After keeping Little Peng in his Kirin bead, Chi-Yu floated down and slowly landed in front of the gate of the holy Buddha temple. Perhaps because of Master Zagru, or because the Sarira bead had saved him several times, although Chi-Yu was a person without faith, he still respected Buddhism very much. Therefore, he didn't fly directly into the temple, but landed outside the gate. He didn't knock because there was no need. Chi-Yu stood in the darkness and released his Kirin's aura. He could feel Master Zagru's aura, and naturally Zagru could also feel his aura. Therefore, what Chi-Yu needed to do now was to wait quietly. As expected, not long after, the gate opened and Zagru, who was dressed in white monk robes, walked out. When he saw Chi-Yu, he couldn't help but smile. "I thought I was wrong just now, but it turns out that you're really here. It seems that the speed at which your strength has increased has far exceeded my expectations. The miracles that happen to you can always make a monk like me, who should have been peaceful, have emotional fluctuations." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Master, although you're a monk, you're also a person of flesh and blood. No one can remain calm forever." Zagru put his palms together. Amitabha, Chi-Yu's words are also filled with Buddhist wisdom. You're worth teaching. Come. As he spoke, he turned and walked into the Saint Buddha temple. Seeing Zagru, who was about the same age as him, walk in, Chi-Yu couldn't help but smile. Zagru was young, but he could always make Chi-Yu feel a sense of respect. The Buddhist energy on his body was completely restrained, but he emitted an invisible aura of peace, as if he could become one with heaven and earth. Zagru was the first person that Chi-Yu respected. Until now, this respect hadn't decreased in the slightest. The path to the Saint Buddha temple was still as steep as before. This was the second time that Chi-Yu had come here. Thinking back to the time when he took refuge in Tibet after beating up Yen Xiaoi, Chi-Yu couldn't help but smile even more. It really was heaven's will. It allowed him to meet Zagru, and it was also because he came to this Saint Buddha temple that he possessed such great power. Feeling the peaceful aura in the temple, Chi-Yu couldn't help but sincerely thank heaven for his kindness. He really didn't dare to imagine what he would choose if he returned to his previous self. Even if all of this would make his life only a tenth of what it used to be, Chi-Yu wouldn't have the slightest bit of regret. As long as he could blossom brilliantly in his life, it was enough for him. After all, after inheriting Kirin's bloodline, he had seen too many unbelievable things, which made his life full of color again. Zagru brought Chi-Yu to a place that he was very familiar with. It was the hall where he raised his level in the past. The heavy door had no effect on Chi-Yu, and the candlelight in the hall made him feel as if he had entered ancient times. After closing the door, Chiyu followed Zagru to the prayer mat in the center of the hall and sat down. Grandmaster, why are you in such a hurry to find me? What happened? Zagru looked at Chiyu with a trace of deep worry in his eyes. Chiyu, because I saw the future. Chiyu was taken aback. Grandmaster, so you have such a powerful ability. Why haven't I heard you mention it before? Zagru shook his head. This isn't my ability, but a premonition, a very bad premonition. At this moment, Zagru didn't look like a young man in his 20s at all. Instead, he looked more like an enlightened monk. A faint Buddhist light surrounded his body. Chiyu didn't interrupt and listened to Zagru. After I returned from the capital, I meditated for 7 days and recalled everything that happened during my time in the secular world. My teacher was right. The Buddhist Dharma is boundless, but it needs to be cultivated in the secular world. Perhaps you didn't feel anything, but being with you for less than a year was extremely important to me. After I returned from the capital, I meditated for 7 days and made a huge breakthrough in my cultivation of the Buddhist Dharma. However, this only brought me worry. Through my Buddhist Dharma and the Buddha's instructions, I had a premonition that in the near future, our world would probably face a huge disaster. It was this sudden premonition that made me understand why there were so many powerful beings in our era. In the past, although the Pope of the Vatican was definitely a powerful existence, the Pope and the cardinals could only summon ordinary angels. However, they could now summon the archangel. In the Greek Empire, it was no longer an ordinary deity who descended. It was the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, and her 12 constellation guardians, who had the strongest combat ability. In the east, you, the unprecedented ink Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds, have appeared. Your powerful strength also proves that you will definitely face an extremely terrifying existence. Your arrival is completely in preparation for a rainy day. And the real disaster is about to descend. Not only will it be a disaster for humans, but it will also be a disaster for all living things in this world. Once the disaster comes, if we can't effectively stop it, I'm afraid. Chapter 250. Zagru nodded and said, although I can't guess what the real disaster is, the final outcome is very likely to be the destruction of the earth. This requires the experts who guard the east and the west to rely on your strength to turn the tide. It's not because you are the saviors of this era, but for your own survival in this world, for your family and friends, you have to do this. Chiyu thought for a while and said, Master, not long ago, I met people from hell. Zagru was shocked and said, Hell? What happened? Then, Chiyu told him how he met Lungaire, everything that happened in the Dark Parliament, and the battle with Lungaire and Lucifer tonight in detail. Master, is the crisis that you predicted referring to hell? Once the great demonic god Satan leads his army of hell to the human world, it is indeed possible to destroy the human race. However, that doesn't seem to be the destruction of the earth. From what Lungaire said, it seems that they are from another plane. What they want to do is to conquer our world, not to destroy it. Moreover, although hell is powerful in the West, the Vatican and the God that they believe in have been their enemy for thousands of years. To be able to resist for such a long time, if the earth wants to descend to the human world, the Vatican and the guys above them will not sit by and watch. I think it is almost impossible for hell to rule the world. I don't know how strong other people are, but I am very clear about Yamu's situation. She was able to fight me to a standstill even before she had fully inherited the goddess Athena's divine seat, nor had she obtained all of Athena's god equipment. Not only that, she was willing to use my life to achieve her goals in order to obtain even greater power. It was evident just how terrifying the amount of power she could obtain was. Even if hell comes, Yamu and her constellation guardians will definitely be able to display their great fighting power. At that time, it is hard to say who will be the winner. Zagru shook his head and said, although what you said is right, you have not fully understood what I mean. The crisis I am referring to is not limited to the West. The hell you just mentioned is just a Western name for the dark world. It's not the hell full of death and souls that we imagine. Hell descended on the human world. Perhaps it was one of the dangers, but it was definitely not the only one. Only the guardians of the West would cause trouble. As for the final outcome, that's not something we can judge. Chiyu was startled. Grandmaster, you mean to say that there are existences like the Western Hell? Will it appear in the East as well? And that is our real threat. Zagreus said, You could say that. But it seemed that this was still not all. Even I couldn't guess what my premonition was. I can only feel that the danger is so great that it is definitely not something that a single person can resist. Not even Empyrean gods. Chiyu thought for a moment, then said, No matter what the danger is, we have to be careful. Before it appears, it is useless for us to make too many guesses. Ever since I returned from London, I've been thinking that regardless of what we'll face in the future, the most important thing for us now is to improve our overall strength. Only by becoming stronger will we be able to effectively resist any crisis that arises. After you left, I have already brought the youngsters of the 4 major clans to the ancient giant beast era, and have achieved some result. I think that when they return to this world again, our East will become even stronger. Oh, by the way, I also have good news for you. The effect of training in the ancient giant beast era is better than I imagined. The strength of our Zodiac Guardian God warriors has already broken through the 5 Clouds realm, and can now use the Zodiac Guardian domain. However, because the domain requires too much energy to activate, and the energy of the domain itself is also too great, it is very difficult to control, and we still need a certain amount of time to train, before we can fully display its power. After hearing Chi-Yu's good news, not only was Zagreus not happy, the worry on his face deepened. Sigh, perhaps the improvement of your strength is more in line with my premonition. I can only tell you that even after you have improved your strength, it is still not enough. Do you know what is the strongest point of my premonition? Speaking of it, it is simply inconceivable. Chi-Yu was stunned and said, What on earth can make your Buddha nature be in danger of losing control? Zagreus' aura was obviously not right. This was already noticed by Chi-Yu when they first met. Even with his Buddha nature, at this moment, he could not dispel his worry, just like an ordinary person. Then, that premonition of his was too terrifying. Zagreus smiled bitterly. In my premonition, the clearest thing is that when the greatest crisis comes, all the forces in the world will unite to fight against it. Not only the East and West protectors will unite, but also your enemies. In my premonition, it is the combination of darkness and light, to fight against that huge crisis together. That's why I have such a judgment. Chi-Yu looked at Zagreus dumbfounded, and said, Master, do you mean that the Vatican may cooperate with the Dark Parliament, or even with the great demon King Satan? No, how is this possible? Even if a world war breaks out and nuclear weapons are widely used, it is impossible for such a situation to occur. The leaders of the various countries have not become crazy. Zagreus sighed and said, This is also what I do not understand, but it is still too early to say these things. What you said just now is right. Before the real crisis comes, all we can do is to constantly strengthen our strength to prepare for what is coming. Chi-Yu, do you know the real reason why I asked you to come here today? Chi-Yu thought for a while and said, Master, you should want to predict the possible enemies of the East protectors with me, right? There are demons in the West. So, what will our East be? Speaking of this, the first thing that came to Chi-Yu's mind was not Chi-Yu in the ancient behemoth period, but the old bull in his body. The old bull was indeed too powerful. Even Lucifer did not stand a chance against him. Although there was the life and death domain, who could guarantee that such a powerful old bull could not think of a solution? Zagreus shook his head and said, No, I did not ask you to come here for this matter. There is no point in guessing. Any plan must be based on the changes. Making wild guesses before the changes appear will only mess up our plans. Chi-Yu looked at him in surprise and said, "Then what is it for? I can't guess." Zagru looked deeply at Chi-Yu. Looking at his hesitant look, Chi-Yu laughed heartily and said, "Master, we are all on the same side. We're all on the same side, so if you have something to say, just say it. Don't tell me you still don't believe in my ability to bear it? Even if the world is really going to be destroyed, it is not my problem alone. If the sky falls, there is still a tall person holding it up. There are many people who do not want the world to be destroyed. Tell me, why did you ask me to come here?" Zagru looked at Chi-Yu, and the light in his eyes gradually became gentle. The light in his eyes gradually became gentle. "Chi-Yu, answer a question of mine first." Chi-Yu nodded and said, "Speak." Zagru said, if one day your family and friends are facing a huge crisis, and they may face the threat of death at any time. Your power cannot save them. At this time, only your enemy can save them. In this case, what will you choose?" Chi-Yu looked at Zagru and could not help but frown, but he still said without hesitation, "If that day really comes, even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will do my best to beg my enemy to save my family and friends. Even if I know it is impossible, I will still do it. After all, that is the only chance." Hearing Chi-Yu say this, Zagru's eyes revealed a smile of admiration. "Good, you are indeed the heir of Kirin's bloodline. If you can think like this, then I am relieved. This time, I asked you to come, is to resolve the hatred in your heart." Chi-Yu's heart moved, as if he had understood something, but he did not say anything, and only quietly looked at Zagru. Zagru said, "When the real crisis comes, whether it is us or the West, facing it alone, the final result may be a tragedy. Maybe my premonition is wrong, but if my premonition is right, then the outcome will definitely be terrible, and we will not be able to bear it. Therefore, in order to be able to gather a greater power to deal with everything that may happen, we need to unite more power. I know that you put in a lot of effort to improve the young people of the 4 big families, in preparation to strengthen the Eastern Guardian in the future. However, you should also understand that in the East, there are only 13 people with innate talent like you and our Zodiac Guardian warriors. Only you can achieve super strength through a short period of cultivation. Although the young people of the 4 big families are already considered superhuman among ordinary people, compared to you, they are still too far away, and it is absolutely impossible for them to improve to your level. Because most of the power that you possess can be said to be given by the heavens because of your mission. Only you, the real powerhouses of the East. When the crisis becomes a global one, to better fight against it, we can't just rely on our own strength. Just now, you said that when hell comes, there will be Athena and the Vatican to stop it, but have you thought about what if hell destroys them? No matter what the next target is, one day they will attack the East. No matter how bad Athena and the Vatican are, after all, they belong to our world, and have only obtained some power. This is the same as you. They will not be able to invade the territory of the Yanhuang Republic. Once the great demonic god Satan destroys them and attacks the East, and the East faces the problem of the East, then faced with the simultaneous attack of both sides, will you be able to deal with it? Stop it! Chi-Yu suddenly growled, interrupting Zagru's words. He had already understood what Zagru meant. "Master, other things can be discussed, but this matter cannot be discussed. You already know what happened to me in the West. Why don't you think about it? Even if I can agree to your suggestion, can my brothers? How can I explain this to my brothers, to Wen Ting, and to my own heart?" Chi-Yu's emotions had already become abnormally agitated. He knew that after Zagru said so much, there was only one point, and that was, he hoped that he could lead the Zodiac Guardian God warriors to cooperate with the Guardians of the West, regardless of the past. This had already crossed the bottom line that Chi-Yu could accept, and that was why his reaction was so intense. Looking at Chi-Yu's red eyes, Zagru could not help but sigh. "Chi-Yu, have you forgotten how you answered my question just now? You said that if only your enemy can save your family and friends, you will beg your enemy at all costs. Now, the Vatican and Yamu are your enemies, and when danger comes, they are likely to become an important force to save your family and friends. Can't you think it through? After all, Chiyu was mature. After his emotional outburst just now, he began to calm down, and the red light in his eyes gradually disappeared. Master, you don't have to say any more. I completely understand what you mean. However, you should also know that I am a selfish person. Even if I am not selfish, do you think I can cooperate with people who have cheated on my feelings, wanted to take my life, and caused the death of my beloved wife? At least, I can't do that. I am not a god, I am just a human. Even if I have the blood of Kirin, I am still a human. I don't have that kind of magnanimity. Towards the Holy See and Greece, I only had one understanding. From the moment I left London, they would only be my enemies. Of course, if you can persuade other brothers and sisters to agree to cooperate with them, I will not object. After all, this is only my own business. When that time comes, I will choose to withdraw from the list of the Zodiac guardian gods, and only rely on my own strength to do what I want to do, and what I must do. Chiyu's words were resolute, and there was no room for negotiation. Looking at the resolute light in Chiyu's eyes, Zagru could not affect his determination, no matter how strong his Buddha's power was. Hatred is indeed the most terrifying emotion. Chiyu, since you have already made up your mind, then I have nothing to say. Let's leave everything to fate. I hope that when the danger that I foresee comes, you can lead everyone out of it. Looking at Zagru's sorrowful eyes, Chiyu could not help but soften his heart. He sighed and said, Master, I am sorry. I know that you are doing this for our own good. However, I, Chiyu, am a man. I have my own dignity, and I also have Kirin's dignity. In this lifetime, we are destined to be enemies' opponent. There can no longer be any changes. Even if the world is destroyed, it will not change. Zagru looked at Chiyu, nodded lightly, and said, All right, I understand. Since that is the case, I will not persuade you any further. Chiyu, I know that you are not only a smart person, but also a person who is very emotional. As a friend, I only hope that when you encounter something, you can prioritize the safety of your family and friends. You must not let your emotions affect your decisions, and cause irreversible consequences. Chiyu nodded lightly and said, Thank you, I understand. Master, if that day really comes, I will naturally make my own choice. However, I have a question that I have always wanted to ask you. Since I am here today, I might as well ask. Zagru said, Go ahead. Chiyu said, Master, what I don't understand is why there are so-called gods and demons in the West, and they are gradually appearing. For example, the goddess Athena that Yamu inherited, the Pope of the Vatican and the cardinals summoned the Archangel, the Dark Parliament summoned the terrifying Demon King, and even the great demon god Satan and the fallen angel Lucifer. And we are in the East. Why do we not have such existences? According to the myths and legends, we in the East also have our own gods and Buddhas. Why can't these gods and Buddhas save the world when the crisis comes? Looking at Chiyu's puzzled gaze, Zagru could not help but be stunned for a moment. He smiled bitterly and said, It is really difficult for me to answer your question. Chiyu said, Then do we have real gods and Buddhas in China? Zagru gave a wry smile and said, If everything is just a legend, then why can you get the power of the samsara fruit? Why can you become the origin of nature? Why can you get the ancient artifact Xianyuan sword? Is all of this something that can be explained by human strength? Chiyu asked, So you're saying that gods and Buddhas exist? But when the gods and Buddhas see the suffering of the world, where are they? Why don't they appear and help us solve all the problems? Zagru nodded gently. He said, Since you have already asked these questions, then let me explain it to you. Even if it will reveal the secrets of heaven, I don't care. After all, you are the head of the Guardians of the East, and there are some things that you should know. Chi-Yu, let me ask you, in your knowledge, who is the most powerful god and Buddha in our Eastern mythology? Chi-Yu thought for a while. He said, I don't know much about mythology, but from the description of the TV and novels I have watched before, it seems to be the Jade Emperor and the Buddha. The Jade Emperor is the emperor of the gods. As for the Tathagata Buddha, he is the greatest Buddha of your Buddhist school. They should be the top existences in the mythology. Zagru smiled slightly, shook his head, and said, No, you are wrong. But you know almost the same as ordinary people. But this is not the real source of our Yenhuang Republic's mythology. And not the real god-king of the Yenhuang Republic. Chi-Yu looked at him in surprise and said, Then who should the real god be? Can you tell me now? Zagru said, Everything you know is really just a legend. As the heavens guide of this generation. When my cultivation ended, I really absorbed the Buddhist power left by all the senior monks, and opened the eye of heaven's guide, which allowed me to see a lot of things. You are right, our Yenhuang Republic also has many gods of our own. Be it the Jade Emperor or the Tathagata Buddha, they all existed. But they are not the most powerful gods, or rather, they are just the servants of the gods. For the sake of their own reputation, they find ways to leave their good names in the world. And most of these gods in the world are just the last god. Even your current strength surpasses most of them. Chi-Yu looked at Zagru, dumbfounded. He did not expect that Zagru would give him such an answer. For a moment, he did not know what to say. The light in his eyes became a little blank. Master, I don't quite understand what you mean. Amitba, Zagru said indifferently. For example, the Buddhists pay attention to compassion, and at the same time, they also promote the Dharma that is good and beneficial to mankind. But the birth of the Buddhists is much later than the gods. In other words, after the gods, the Buddhists gradually appeared. The Buddhists themselves are a special branch of the gods, but they are not interfered with by the gods. Even though I am a Buddhist, I have to admit all this. The more Chi-Yu listened, the more surprised he became, and the light in his eyes flickered. Since Zagru, a senior monk of Buddhism, said so, all of this was very credible. But all this was far from what he had always understood. Master, what kind of existence are the real gods, the really powerful gods? Zagru said, in a sense, the gods of the East are the real gods of this world, and they are also the gods who created this world. Those gods of the West, in fact, gradually appeared after the appearance of the Eastern gods. A long, long time ago, at the beginning of chaos, our Earth, and even the solar system, were only in a state of free energy. And in the billions of years of evolution, two huge masses of energy appeared in the solar system. These two masses of energy, after millions of years of condensation, began to develop intelligence. As for them, they are our ancient gods, the true gods. These two incomparably huge masses of energy have opposite attributes, and they also oppose each other. This is the main reason why they have always been in a state of hostility. Their attributes, one is fire and the other is water. When their energy reached a state of saturation, the fire and water energies finally collided violently. The fire and water energies finally collided violently, resulting in an intense explosion and energy mutation. That's how our world came to be. Then, the solar system appeared, and then 9 planets revolving around the solar system appeared. Although these two masses of energy are nothing compared to the whole universe, if not for their collision, there would not be what we have now. Chi-Yu asked impatiently, So who are they? Zagru said, In the history of the Yenhuang Republic, who are the gods named after fire and water respectively? Chi-Yu was stunned. He thought for a while and said, Are you talking about the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong? Zagru smiled and nodded. Yes, it's them. They are the real gods, the super gods who created our world. Chi-Yu looked at Zagru, dumbfounded. He did not expect that the human world, and even the entire solar system, were the creators. Turned out to be these two legendary gods. In the legend of the Yenhuang Republic, because the fire god Zhurong and the water god fought together, they broke the sky, causing great changes in the world. In the end, goddess Nviwa sacrificed her life to mend the broken sky, creating the current human world. She created the current human world, and goddess Nuwa was the legendary ancestor of the human race. But now, everything that Zagru said was obviously not the case. Everything was completely different from what he had imagined. Zagru's explanation of the myths and legends aroused a strong interest in Chiyu. Zagru continued, after the collision of the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong, because of the huge amount of energy, they created this world. Because of the energy mutation, their intelligence suddenly went from elementary to advanced. However, their energy had also been greatly affected by the collision between them, and had been greatly weakened. Although they had intelligence, they did not have enough energy, so they could only be confined to the entire solar system, unable to leave. Because of the attributes of the book, the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong began to have conflicts. While they recovered their divine power, they continued to fight in this solar system. Millions upon millions of years passed in this manner. The universe is a wonderful world. In the process of their continuous battle, the third planet of the 9 planets of the solar system began to show signs of life, and this planet is our Earth. With the continuous evolution, low-level creatures began to appear on Earth. After countless years of development, the low-level creatures turned into plants. After repeated transformations, the ancestors of the human race finally appeared. At this time, the battle between the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong had also continued to a certain extent. After the continuous fighting between the two of them, they realized that there was not much difference in their strength. No matter how they continued to fight, there would not be a result. Moreover, because of the huge consumption caused by the battle, they could not recover to their original peak state. Therefore, they chose to stop fighting at the same time. At this time, both Gonggong and Zhurong had discovered the life on Earth. Therefore, they thought of many things. Since life could appear on Earth as a huge energy body, they could naturally create life in the form of energy. As long as they could have such an army, they would naturally be able to destroy the other party. Perhaps because Gonggong and Zhurong appeared in this world at the same time, they actually had the same idea. They acted at the same time and started the process of creating gods. Creating gods? Are the legendary gods of the Yenhuang Republic created by them? Chiyu asked curiously. Zagru nodded and said, "You can say that, but you can also say that they are not. The water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong first created an energy life with intelligence. During the process of creation, they realized that it was very easy to create an energy life. It was easy to create an energy body with life, but it was extremely difficult to give it intelligence. Therefore, in the process of continuous creation, after countless failures, they only managed to create one each. Their failed creations were directly abandoned and thrown into the solar system, becoming a byproduct. However, how could they have known that it was the byproducts of their creation that, after continuous mutation and evolution, eventually possessed their own intelligence, which was the so-called gods of the West? Some of them were strong, while others were weak. However, compared to Gonggong and Zhurong, they were simply incomparable. There were many weaker gods. When the two intelligent life forms created by Gonggong and Zhurong were completed, the battle between the two gods started again. This time, they brought their own helpers. However, what made them not know whether to laugh or cry was that the result was still the same as before. Neither of them could do anything to the other. The energy bodies they created were still as powerful as before. Neither of them could destroy the other. This evolved into a situation where both sides suffered losses. The two gods they created were the first two gods that human beings knew. The one created by the fire god Zhurong was Nuwa, who was known as the mother of mankind. The one created by the water god Gonggong was Pangu. During the battle between the two gods, Pangu once displayed his great power and left a vision in the human world. In the end, it was misunderstood by human beings as Pangu splitting the sky and the earth. Therefore, the legend of Pangu splitting the sky and splitting the chaos came into being. As for the legend of Nuwa, it might be because she was too beautiful. Moreover, Nuwa's weapon was the Nuwa stone that she made herself. Coupled with people's association, the legend of Nuwa mending the sky came into being. Gong Gong, the water god, and Zhu Rong, the fire god, had only appeared in the human world for a short period of time. Therefore, not many people remember them. Therefore, in the legends of human beings, they are not as famous as Goddess Nviwa and Pangu. Chiyu understood and said, I see. Then what happened after the battle? There must be a winner in the end. Chapter 251. Chiyu looked at Zagru in shock. Cleanse? Could it be that the two great gods actually killed the gods of the East? It's no wonder so many problems have appeared in the world. Western godfiends have appeared, but our side is so calm. Zagru sighed and said, That's right. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, the two great gods absorbed the energy of the gods back into their own bodies and erased their wisdom. But in order to prevent the East from being affected and not be suppressed by the West, they left behind a branch god, which is the Buddha that I believe in. The two deities repeatedly told Buddha that no matter when, he must never get involved in the affairs of earth. Otherwise, the seal left in his body would explode. At the same time, in order to prevent the imbalance between the East and the West, the two great gods gave Buddha a certain amount of divine power, allowing him to guide the rapid development of humans in the East. It is precisely because of this that our Yanhuang Republic has existed for 5,000 years. In ancient times, our development was far ahead of the Western world. Chiyu frowned. If that's the case, how do we solve the problem of God? After all, we don't have gods. Those gods in the West can eventually transfer a part of their power to Earth. Once they want to do something to the East, how can we deal with it? Zagru smiled faintly and said, The two great gods possess great wisdom, how could they overlook this? Although there were no true gods in the East, there were ancient beasts in the East that the West did not have. These were left behind by the two great gods. At the same time, because of the primordial beasts, the two great gods condensed their great power and created 10 divine weapons to intimidate the East and maintain the balance between the primordial beasts. With the overall strength of the ancient beasts and the 10 divine artifacts, the humans of the East could rely on these advantages to fight against the West. Therefore, even though we don't have any gods in the East, it's still very difficult for the West to defeat us and obtain anything. Chiyu let out a long sigh. So there are actually so many reasons. But Great Master, if that's the case, then the experts from the East shouldn't be weaker than those from the West. But why does the West have so many experts, while our East has nothing? Zagru shook his head and said, No, you are wrong. The East is not completely without anything, it is just that your strength is far from enough. Furthermore, regardless of whether it was the East or the West, they had their own systems. For example, the West had light while the East had darkness. They would always fight against each other. On the other hand, in the East there are divine beasts and ferocious beasts, and divine beasts and ferocious beasts can be used by people. They are also opposing each other. Humans in the West can activate the power of the gods and demons, but we humans in the East can also use the power of the 10 great divine weapons to resist the invasion of all threat. It's just that your strength hasn't reached that level yet. Otherwise, with your strength as the king of the Zodiac, you would definitely be able to contend against the gods and demons of the West. You just said that the fallen angel Lucifer couldn't fight back at all under the Bull Demon King's attack. This proves that the Bull Demon King's power has reached the level of a god. If you can become a powerful being of his, you will also become a god. Chiyu nodded and said, So that's how it is. In that case, the most important things in the East are the 10 great divine weapons. No wonder Ling Er's so-called infernal weapon was no match for the Xianyuan sword. And this is under the condition that Xuanyuan's soul is no longer there. Zagru stood up and said, "Come with me. This time, I called you to Tibet because there are some things I want you to see. A crisis is coming. As an outsider, I can only use it to help you." As he spoke, Zagru walked towards the back of the hall. Chiyu followed Zagru around the Buddha statue inside the hall. He was surprised to find that behind the Buddha statue, there was actually a lot of space. Chiyu followed Zaglu around the Buddha statue in the inner part of the hall. To his surprise, there was still quite a space behind the Buddha statue. Furthermore, a special Buddha statue was also enshrined in the innermost area. It was only 1 meter tall and seemed to be a monk, but there was an invisible energy aura around it. It was only 1 meter tall and looked like a monk, but there was an invisible energy aura around it. That was definitely the purest Buddhist energy. Chiyu was sure of this. Zagru walked in front of the Buddha statue and put his palms together in front of his chest. Amitba. Bodhisattva Mahakasayapa. A faint Buddhist aura gradually shone, and a spot of white light gathered in front of Zagru. A huge amount of Buddhist energy filled the entire hall. Chiyu naturally recognized that it was Zagru's living Sarira. The Buddhist aura shone brightly. The Buddha statue in front of him looked even more solemn. A circle of faint white light also emitted from the Buddha statue. Chiyu felt his body tense up, as if he was bound by something. However, his body became very comfortable. In the next moment, everything in front of him changed. When Chiyu's 6 senses recovered from their momentary daze, he was surprised to find that he was in another place. It was no longer darkness in the hall. Everything around him was lit up. At the same time, the scenery in front of him became unusually beautiful. It was a grassland. A faint light flickered, and every time it flashed, the scenery in front of him seemed to change. From afar, Chiyu found that the road in front of him seemed to be blocked by a huge mountain, and the huge mountain in front of him was actually plain. Zagru appeared beside Chiyu out of nowhere. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "Come, let's go up and take a look." Although they were in this strange world, it did not affect their ability to fly. They rose into the air and in the blink of an eye, they were already in midair. In midair, Chiyu found that there was not 1 mountain below him, but 5. The 5 huge mountains formed a special shape. Among them, the mountain in the east was the green mountain they had seen earlier, the mountain in the west was golden, the mountain in the north was blue, the mountain in the south was red, and the mountain in the middle was earthy yellow. Zagru said, "These 5 mountains represent the 5 Emperor of Heaven." Back then, when the 2 great gods Gong Gong and Zhu Rong were purging the gods of the West, they subdued the 5 Emperor of Heaven under the Jade Emperor. They combined their powers and created one of the 10 great divine weapons. The 5 Emperor of Heaven represent the East, First, Second, and Wood respectively, which is the green mountain you saw earlier. There is also the West Gingshin metal, the North Rengui water, the South Bingding fire, and the Central Wuji earth. Based on their attributes, you should be able to determine the 5 mountains below. Chiyu's eyes lit up. Thinking of the 10 great divine weapons and Zagru's words, he immediately realized what the divine weapon Zagru was talking about was. A divine weapon that can summon the 5 Emperor of Heaven should be the Kongtong seal, which is ranked 8th among the 10 great divine weapons, right? Zagru smiled and said, "Yes, it is the Kongtong seal." The Kongtong seal was actually formed by the energy of the 5 Emperor of Heaven, so it has the appearance of the 5 Emperor of Heaven. At the same time, there is a jade dragon coiling around it. It can be used to summon the immortal divine dragon to protect it. It is one of the most powerful treasures among the 10 great divine weapons. One of its main functions is to protect the immortal divine dragon, and the other is to change the 5 elemental attributes of the 5 Emperor of Heaven's energy. When you use it, as long as you have enough energy, you can summon the 5 Emperor of Heaven's energy, and an undying domain will appear. In a sense, this domain is an absolute domain. Of course, the appearance of an absolute domain will inevitably lead to certain problems. That is, the energy consumption of this domain is incomparably huge. However, once the undying domain is launched, whoever the user wants to protect, as long as they are within the range of the undying domain, then they will absolutely not die. They can be completely immune to any form of attack. This is absolute immortality. Chi Yu's eyes lit up, and he said, "Great Master, so the place you brought me to is the special plane where the Kongtong seal is sealed? Can I get the Kongtong seal with a trace of you?" Zagru said, "That's right, that's what I mean. Today, I asked you to come to Tibet to find me. One reason is to persuade you to cooperate with the Western Guardians as much as possible, and the other is that the time is ripe. After I opened the Eye of Heaven's attraction, I finally found this place, and also found the way to get the Kongtong seal. In order for you to better face the enemies that might appear in the future, I hope that you can obtain this divine weapon. Don't underestimate the Kongtong seal. Although it is ranked 8th among the 10 great divine weapons, its true power is extremely great. In other words, each of the 10 great divine weapons has its own absolute uniqueness. For example, the sharpness and overbearingness of the Xianyuan sword and the Panguak. The Eastern Emperor Bell can communicate with heaven and earth, and the Kunlun mirrors can travel through time. These abilities cannot be imitated by other divine weapons. Other than the Xianyuan sword and the Panguaks, which are somewhat similar in a sense, the other divine weapons are different in all aspects. Among the 10 great divine weapons, any one of them is definitely a unique super treasure. Of course, Chi Yu would not underestimate the Kongtong seal. No matter what its ranking was, it was still one of the 10 great divine weapons. With the Xianyuan sword, his strength had already increased by several times. If he also had the undying domain of the Kongtong seal, then his strength would definitely become even more powerful. At that time, he would no longer have to be afraid of the gods and devils of the West. "Great Master, how can I get the Kongtong seal?" Chi Yu asked eagerly and excitedly. Looking at Chi Yu's impatient appearance, Zagru couldn't help but laugh. You're always so impatient. Don't worry, apart from you, no one else in this world can get the Kongtong seal. For others, it's absolutely impossible to obtain it, even if they know how to obtain it. However, for you, it's an extremely easy task. Chi Yu was stunned and said, "Easy? How can it be easy?" He was very clear about the power of the 10 great divine weapons. In order to get the Xianyuan sword and the Kunlun mirrors, he had gone through countless trials and tribulations. He had even narrowly escaped death. In the end, he only succeeded with the help of luck. Now that Zagru said that it would be very easy for him to get the Kongtong seal, how could Chi Yu believe him? Zagru smiled and said, "Wait until I explain the reason, then you will naturally understand. Do you still remember the story about the gods that I told you just now? Actually, I didn't really see them from the sky. This story is actually imprinted in the Kongtong 5 Elements mountain. Because I'm a heavenly guide, I received the blessings of Buddha. Therefore, although I can't get the Kongtong seal from here, I won't be attacked by the restrictions that seal the Kongtong seal. This allowed me to peep into the secrets of the gods and Buddhas in the 5 Elements divine mountain. Speaking of which, when I saw this, I almost lost my Buddhist heart." Looking at Zagru's frightened expression, Chi Yu couldn't help but laugh. "Great Master, quickly tell me, how can I get the Kongtong seal?" Zagru said, "Back then, when the 2 great gods Gonggong and Zhurong created the 10 great divine weapons, they originally didn't want to leave all of them in the East. They only wanted to leave 1 or 2. However, later on, they discovered that there was an imbalance between the divine weapons. In order to not have any competitive spirit, they decided to leave all of the 10 great divine weapons in the East. However, there were also restrictions in their seals. That is, the 10 great divine weapons absolutely cannot appear at the same time. No matter when, at most, 5 of the 10 great divine weapons can appear in this world. When the 10 great divine weapons were created, why was it said that there was an imbalance? That's because among the 10 great divine weapons, Zhurong created 6, while Gonggong only created 4. If he didn't leave all of the 10 great divine weapons in the human world, in terms of overall strength, Zhurong would surpass Gonggong. Qiyu, what does this have to do with me getting the Kongtong seal? Zagru smiled and said, of course it has to do with the Kongtong seal. Because the divine weapons are also divided into camps, and they belong to different camps. It's absolutely impossible for one person to get 2. Among the 10 great divine weapons, the divine weapons that can only be obtained by humans were all created by Zhurong. And the divine weapons that don't have any restrictions were created by Gonggong. Qiyu said, so you're saying that my Xianyuan sword was created by the great god Zhurong, and Chio's Pangu axe was created by the great god Gonggong? Hearing Qiyu's words, Zagru couldn't help but change his expression. What did you say? What Chio's Pangu axe? Qiyu said, after we arrived at the ancient giant beast age. After a period of training, I was prepared to bring everyone to fight against the Jili tribe to increase their combat experience. However, I didn't expect to meet Qiyu in the battle against the Jili tribe. Qiyu didn't die at that time. After he recovered from his injuries, he actually spent a long time looking for a Pangu axe that could fight against the Xianyuan sword. In the end, he actually succeeded. I learned a lot from the battle with Qiyu. However, his Pangu axe is indeed powerful. In terms of quality, it's not inferior to the Xianyuan sword at all. Qiyu briefly told him what happened during the era of the ancient beasts when he led the Zodiac army. After listening to Qiyu, Zagru couldn't help but frown. Qiyu, I suddenly realized a problem. Perhaps the history of the ancient beasts has been changed because of your appearance. Qiyu was stunned. That can't be. I didn't do anything. Even when I helped the humans fight against the Jili people, I was only assisting them. I didn't intend to destroy the Jili people. In the end, we still have to rely on the humans of that era to defeat the Jili people. Zagru shook his head. No, you're wrong. Facts have proven that you have indeed affected that era. Haven't you done anything yet? You obtained the Xianyuan sword and the Kunlun mirrors. This has already had a huge impact on the entire era of the ancient beasts. You've also allowed them to come into contact with some things that belong to our modern era. These will have an impact on the era of the ancient beasts. More importantly, you've even taken in the Bull Demon King, a powerful ferocious beast of that era, as your servant. This has caused the entire situation to change. Perhaps this is also the reason why Qiyu was able to reappear. After listening to Zagru's words, Qiyu couldn't help but shiver. Great Master, what should I do now? Will the changes in the era of the ancient beasts affect our current era? Zagru pondered for a moment. At least for now, it doesn't seem to be a big problem. I think that even if you've changed some aspects of that era, as long as the overall situation hasn't changed, it won't affect our current era. In other words, in the battle against the Jili people, the humans must obtain the final victory, and the ancient beasts will eventually disappear under the influence of the humans. Qiyu heaved a sigh of relief. That's good. Now that the Zodiac army is helping the humans, even with Qiyu's leadership, it won't be easy for the Jili people to take advantage of them. Zagru sighed and said, if it was just the Qiyu of the past, perhaps there wouldn't be any problems. However, the situation is different now. Qiyu has obtained Pangu's axe, allowing him to become even more powerful than before. Pangu's axe is the strongest offensive weapon created by the great god Gonggong. How can the enormous energy contained in it be ordinary? Once Qiyu is able to unleash the full power of Pangu's axe, the era of the ancient beasts will definitely face a disaster. Because of Qiyu's hatred for the humans, this disaster will be even greater than when the Bull Demon King existed. Now, only you and the Xianyuan sword can fight against Qiyu. Therefore, you can never let go of the opportunity to completely leave that era. You must maintain your resistance against Qiyu. Only when he's completely destroyed and history returns to its original state can you do so. After listening to Zagru's words, Qiyu couldn't help but feel a little awkward. Zagru was right. However, destroying Qiyu was easier said than done. Perhaps, with the power of the Bull Demon King, Qiyu could indeed be destroyed. However, only God knew what would happen after the Bull Demon King obtained Pangu's axe. One must know that his tyrannical strength was not something that Qiyu could compare with. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Qiyu would never help the Bull Demon King obtain Pangu's axe. I can only do my best in this matter. I hope that I can improve my strength to a sufficient level as soon as possible to fight against Qiyu. Great Master, please continue to talk about the 10 great artifacts. Zagru glanced at Qiyu with some worry. He said, "Your judgment just now is correct. The Xianyuan sword was formed by the great god Zhu Rong's combination of the energy of the sun, the moon, and the stars, in addition to all kinds of energy that were already available on Earth at that time. And the Pangu's axe was created by the great god Gong Gong. Although their relationship had been reconciled, it was inevitable that they still had the intention to win. However, it was inevitable that they would still have the intention to win. Hence, when they were creating the god tools, they all targeted each other. The 6 artifacts created by the great god Zhu Rong were not all created by him. One of them was naturally condensed energy between heaven and earth, and the other was created by goddess Nuwa. And the artifact that was naturally condensed was the Kunlun mirrors obtained by the Snow Girl. With it, it could travel through time and space. And the artifact created by goddess Nuwa was naturally the Nuwa stone that had the ability to bring the dead back to life. Because of the appearance of these 2 artifacts, the balance of power between the great god Gong Gong and the great god Zhu Rong was broken. Fortunately, the power of these 2 artifacts was far less powerful than the artifacts created by the 2 great gods, so there were no real problems. And these 2 artifacts were naturally ranked at the bottom of the 10 great artifacts. As for the other 8 divine artifacts, the Xianyuan sword, the Eastern Emperor Bell, the Kongtong seal, and the Devil Refining Gourd were created by the great god Zhu Rong, while the other 4 were created by the great god Gong Gong. Although the Eastern Emperor Bell was ranked first, in fact, its real power was not very strong. It was only ranked first because it could connect to all the sealed planes from Earth. And the Demon Refining Gourd and the Fushi Zither, created by the great god Gong Gong, were opposite each other. These 2 artifacts directly destroyed the enemy with energy fluctuations. The difference was that one absorbed the enemy, while the other used the sound of the zither to shock the enemy. But the effect was similar, and they were both the most powerful auxiliary weapons. And among the other 3 artifacts created by them, the Shennong Cauldron and the Eastern Emperor Bell had something in common. They were not mainly used in battle, so they could be ignored. And the artifacts that were really used in battle, on the great god Gong Gong's side, it was ranked 2nd, the Xianyuan sword, and ranked 8th, the Kongtong seal. And on the great god Gong Gong's side, it was ranked 3rd, the Pangu axe, and ranked 5th, the Haotian pagoda. The 4 artifacts are opposite each other, and their power is basically balanced. An idea flashed in Qiyu's mind, and he said, "Great Master, after saying so much, are you trying to tell me that when the Xianyuan sword and the Kongtong seal are used together, they can directly produce a special effect?" Zagru smiled and said, "Yes, that's right. After the 2 great gods created the 4 main offensive artifacts, they were not used by themselves. It was not for their own use, because they did not need to rely on any magic treasures at all. So they gave the 4 artifacts to Nuwa and Pangu respectively. Pangu mastered the Pangu axe and the Haotian pagoda, and Lady Nuwa naturally mastered the Xianyuan sword and the Kongtong seal. In addition to the Nuwa stone, which she created herself, her overall power had already surpassed Pangu. In the end, it was precisely because of this reason that the 10 great artifacts were all left in the human world. Pangu and Nuwa also followed the 2 great gods Zhu Rong and Gong Gong to break through the void and travel to the distant universe. The 10 great artifacts are left in our world, and their status is equivalent to the Western gods. They can give the human beings of the Yanhuang Republic energy, which is equivalent to the ability of the gods that the Western gods and devils have inherited from the human beings. Chiyu suddenly understood and said, "So that's how it is. No wonder there have been no gods in the East. Turns out that the former gods were too powerful and were completely destroyed by the 2 great gods Gong Gong and Zhu Rong. However, the myth that you told me is too shocking. If it were an ordinary person, I'm afraid it would be very difficult to believe." Zagru said, "This is the secret of heaven. If it weren't for the fact that you are the leader of this generation of Guardians of the East and will lead the Guardians of the East to fight against all possible crises, I wouldn't have brought you here and told you everything." Chiyu nodded and said, "Master, don't worry. I definitely won't let you down. Now you should tell me how to get the Kongtong seal." Zagru smiled and said, "As I said just now, it's very easy for you to get the Kongtong seal. The Kongtong seal and the Xianyuan sword used to belong to Lady Nuwa. Therefore, when the Kongtong seal was set up, the seal stipulated that the person who obtains the Kongtong seal must be a human. The second point is that you must have one of the other 2 artifacts of Lady Nuwa and awaken the seal spirit in the Kongtong seal through the soul in the artifact. Only then can you get the approval of the Kongtong seal. No one knows where the stone of Nuwa is, but isn't the Xianyuan sword with you? As long as you use the power of the Xianyuan sword, you can naturally awaken the Kongtong seal and get its approval." When Chiyu heard Zagru's words, he immediately understood and couldn't help but be overjoyed. If he could get another artifact, even if he faced the Bull Demon King, he would be able to protect himself. It seemed that the strength of the East was definitely not inferior to that of the West. Once he could fully exert the power of these 2 artifacts, why would he be afraid of the great devil god of hell? At that time, it would really be a case of killing gods and demons in the way. A faint light flickered, and the light in Chi Yu's eyes became more concentrated. However, he suddenly realized a problem, and the excitement in his heart suddenly disappeared. "Master, I'm afraid it's not possible." Zagru was stunned and said, "What do you mean? Don't you understand what I mean?" Chiyu said with a wry smile, "No, of course I understand what you mean. It's just that when I fought against those guys from the Vatican in London, in order to save me, Senior Xianyuan Soul finally used his own power to activate the Loss Formation. The Loss Formation with the Xianyuan sword as the core is the God-killing formation, and it destroyed all the enemies who posed a threat to me at that time. However, because of this, Senior Xianyuan Soul directly fell into a deep sleep. He said that he would need 100 days to recover. Now, I'm afraid it's impossible to use him to get the approval of the Kongtong seal." Chapter 252. Hearing Zagru's words, Chiyu nodded and said, "That's the only way now. As long as I can obtain the recognition of the Kongtong seal, let alone a month, I'm willing to wait for a year." Zagru pointed to the mountain below and smiled. "Then, I'll leave this place to you. I'm going out. After you obtain the Kongtong seal, you'll naturally be able to leave this space with the help of the seal spirit. Take care of yourself. Before Senior Xianyuan Hun wakes up, don't be in a hurry to obtain the recognition of the Kongtong seal, understand?" Chiyu nodded. "Grandmaster, don't worry. I've also obtained 2 god artifacts in the past, so I have a certain level of understanding regarding the seals of god artifacts. As long as the opportunity hasn't arrived, it's impossible for humans to go against the seals left behind by the 2 great gods." Zagru looked at Chiyu approvingly, put his hands together, bowed slightly to Chiyu, and floated away. Feeling the surging energy of the 5 elements in the west, Chiyu's heart was filled with excitement at this moment. Everything else was thrown to the back of his mind. Now, he just wanted to properly cultivate in this space of the five elements mountains. That enormous five-elemental aura was absolutely beneficial to his energy. He didn't want to waste any more time. Chi-Yu floated up and headed towards the five elements mountains below. The first mountain he chose was the Blue Mountain in the north. Although his water thundercloud force had already reached the 8 clouds realm, just like when it reached the 7 clouds realm, the thundercloud force's improvement wasn't stable enough, and the energy hadn't completely reached the 8 clouds level. Since he could only borrow the power of 2 mountains in the 5 elements mountains, he would first completely upgrade his water thundercloud force to the 8 clouds realm, then upgrade his fire thundercloud force. As for the 9 clouds, he didn't dare to think about it. After all, before all 4 types of thundercloud force were upgraded to the 8 clouds, there wouldn't be any more breakthroughs in the thundercloud force. Ever since he truly felt the power of the 4 types of thundercloud force, Chi-Yu would no longer rely on the energy of the origin of nature to enhance the 4 types of thundercloud force. In terms of strength, the improvement obtained in that way was far less effective than the improvement obtained by cultivating each type of thundercloud force one by one. Kirin had a total of 9 clouds. If he managed to reach 9 clouds, he would not have the true strength of a 9 clouds. It would be difficult for him to improve in the future. Therefore, for the sake of long-term consideration, Chi-Yu had to choose a stupid method. He raised his thundercloud force one by one. Zaglu floated out of the 5-element mountain space and once again appeared in the dark Great Hall. He did not leave the Great Hall. Instead, he clasped his hands together in front of his chest and lowered his eyes. Facing the center of the Great Hall, he sighed and said, "You've heard everything that I said to Chi-Yu earlier. I'm sorry, benefactor. Although I'm also willing to cooperate with the East and the West, however, everything you did at that time hurt him too deeply. You should know Chi-Yu's character better than I do." In the darkness, a slender figure walked out. Under the dim candlelight in the hall, the slender figure looked so lonely. Her long purple hair was set off by a long white dress. She looked so alluring. However, the light in her eyes was filled with endless sorrow. Her body was even trembling slightly. The person who suddenly appeared in the hall was none other than Yamu, the one who tricked Chi-Yu in London and used Chi-Yu's origin of nature to completely inherit Goddess Athena's divine power. Yamu's face was still wet with tears. She looked at Master Zagru and bowed. "Master, you've done your best. After all, I created it myself. It's all my fault. Unfortunately, it's already too late. If it wasn't for the fact that I have too many responsibilities on my shoulders, I really don't want to continue suffering like this." Zagru looked at Yamu. He could clearly feel Yamu's restless emotions. He sighed deeply and said, "I can understand your pain, but similarly, you should also understand Chi-Yu's pain. Don't think too much about it. Your mission now is the same as Chi-Yu's. Both are to improve your strength as much as possible in order to face the world's crisis that may appear at any time. You've completely inherited Goddess Athena's divine power. It can be said that you're the real Goddess Athena now. In a sense, it's not wrong for you to make an extreme choice in order to chase after greater power in a short period of time. After all, you have the support of millions of people in Greece. It's just that what you did was wrong. I think that if you directly told Chi-Yu that you hope to get help from his source of nature, even if it would consume a lot of energy for Chi-Yu, given his character, he would probably agree. Unfortunately, you took advantage of his feelings. Chi-Yu is an orphan. Since he was a child, he has suffered the warmth and coldness of the human world. Therefore, he is very stubborn about his feelings. From love to hatred, this kind of hatred is the strongest. The Battle of Everest can no longer be changed, but the final outcome can only be decided by you and Chi-Yu." Listening to Zagru's words, Yamu did not speak for a long time. This time, she specially came to Tibet to look for Master Zagru. One reason was because Chi-Yu's aura had disappeared, and the other was to get Master Zagreus' help. Through various investigations in Greece, Yamu knew that on Chi Yu's side, the only one who could persuade Chi Yu was Master Zagreus in front of her. Therefore, she came. However, seeing that Chi Yu hated her so deeply, what else could she do? Chi Yu had said that hatred could not be resolved, and everything could only be solved by force. If it weren't for the fact that she had too many things on her shoulders, Yamu really wanted to die in the hands of Chi Yu. Only then would her heart be free. When Chi Yu was resurrected, the constellation guardian Mephistopheles had a premonition that Chi Yu would be Yamu's only flaw, but even he did not know. For Yamu, this flaw was so huge. It was only later when Mephistopheles understood, it was already too late. Thank you, Master. I'm very grateful for your guidance. I'm leaving. The next time I come to Tibet will be on the 10th of January. I don't know if I'll see you again then. As she spoke, Yamu slowly turned around and walked out of the hall. Zagreus looked at her silent back view and put his palms together. Amitba, all causes and effects are determined by the heavens. Almsgiver, take care. 10th of January. For Chi Yu, it was a special day. That was his birthday, the most painful day for him in the past 20 years. Hearing Zagreus' words, Yamu could not help but tremble. She naturally knew that Chi Yu was an orphan. For an orphan, birthday was undoubtedly the most painful day. She did not say anything more. Yamu seemed to have thought through some things and floated away. Looking at Yamu's back view as she left, Zagreus' eyes were hazy as he shook his head. Is this an ill-fated relationship? Strength bestowed by the heavens is not necessarily a good thing. They should have been such a good couple. But it turned out to be like this. I hope that Chi Yu can be a little more open-minded at the last moment. If he is responsible, I'm afraid that this world really does not have the power to resist the crisis. The Battle of Mount Everest will either be the end of everything, or it will be the beginning of everything. This will depend on how they choose. Time passed quickly. It had been more than a month since Chi Yu left the era of the ancient beasts. Ryue stood on the hillside and looked at the vast plains in the distance. Ever since Chi Yu left, the Zodiac army, under the leadership of the 12 Zodiac Guardians, had cooperated with the human army in more than 10 battles. Each time they had achieved great result. They had forced the Jili people's army to retreat step by step. If it was not for the fact that the Jili people's army had extremely strong defenses, they would have lost more than a third of their army. Modern weapons should have been extremely powerful when used in ancient times. However, when the battle began, the people from the modern era understood that everything was not as simple as it seemed. The Jili people of the ancient beasts era had extremely strong defenses. Even armor-piercing bullets could only cause a certain amount of damage to them and could not kill them. It was no wonder that the Jili people, with only 50,000 soldiers, were able to annihilate an army of close to 1 million soldiers from the 4 main tribes. However, it was also thanks to the appearance of these modern weapons that the Jili people's casualties had increased significantly. The destructive power of firearms was still very strong. Just because one shot could not kill them did not mean that a group of shots could not kill them. During the continuous battles, the Jili people were unable to retaliate with the coordination of the Zodiac army and the firearms they had brought with them. They could only continuously retreat in defeat. Once Nali, the strongest among them, appeared, Ryue would naturally lead the Zodiac army to face him. As for Irua, the black tortoise and the green dragon, the 2 divine beasts, they became supervisors at Chi Yu's request before he left. They would only intervene when the Zodiac army was in danger. After going through the baptism of more than 10 battles, although the speed of improvement couldn't be compared to the first month of training, every member of the Zodiac army had become much more tenacious than before. The real killing and army-level battles allowed them to obtain countless valuable experiences on the battlefield, as well as the baptism of their actual combat abilities. In the process of everyone's hard work, everyone's abilities had improved by leaps and bounds. This improvement was reflected in the cooperation of the entire Zodiac army. Each of the 12 small teams of the Zodiac army had formed an individual combat team with the team leader as the core. The 12 small teams were also a large combat team. On the battlefield, they were like a huge meat grinder. The solid defense of the ordinary Jilly people, which even bullets could not penetrate, was nothing in front of the Zodiac army. The continuous battles had baptized these youths into obvious changes. Although there were only over 100 of them, in the eyes of both the Jilly people and the 4 main tribes, they were a group of steel lions. They were a group of steel lions that could change the entire situation of the battle. Big Sister Ryue, are you thinking about him again? Ming Ming's voice rang out from behind Ryue. Ryue turned around and smiled at Ming Ming. Ming Ming had also undergone obvious changes after coming to the era of the ancient beast. She was still lively and cheerful, but her immaturity had disappeared. She had now become an important commander on the battlefield. Her chicken Zodiac army was ranked among the top few in the entire Zodiac army. Are you making fun of me, Ming Ming? Don't you miss him? Ryue looked at Ming Ming and couldn't help but laugh. Ming Ming giggled and said, "Of course I miss him, but what's the use of missing him? That guy. He was so happy that he forgot about home and home. Why didn't he hurry back?" Ryue raised her hand and patted Ming Ming's head. She said dotingly, "You little girl. He must have been tied up by something, otherwise he would have returned long ago. It's useless for us to be anxious. Without the Kunlun mirrors, none of us can go back." Ming Ming said, "Big Sister Ryue, there are less than 2 months until the 10th of January. Do you think we can defeat the constellation guardian led by Yamu?" Ryue shook her head and said, "I don't know, but one thing is for sure. Yamu must be very powerful. If she hadn't harmed Chiyu, perhaps our eastern protectors and their western protectors might have been able to cooperate." Ming Ming said hatefully, "What cooperation? Hasn't she harmed Chiyu enough? If it wasn't for Big Sister Wen-Ting, Chiyu would have." As she said that, Ming Ming's eyes revealed a trace of sorrow. Wen-Ting was already dead. She could completely understand Chiyu's feelings at that time. If she had the ability to save Chiyu, she would have done it without hesitation. Just as she was about to say something, she was suddenly shocked. She looked into the distance at the foot of the hill. She didn't know when, but a patch of green was slowly moving towards them. It was not the thriving green of nature, but a wretched green full of deathly stillness. In the flickering light, the wretched green figures seemed to have no end, especially the tall figures at the front, which made people feel even more terrified. The Jili tribe had come. Ming Ming was slightly shocked and said, "How could this be? Why would they suddenly attack us now? Haven't we been the ones with the advantage recently? Aren't they sending themselves to their deaths by attacking us from the front?" Ryue's eyes revealed a solemn glint. "No, they aren't sending themselves to their deaths. I'm afraid that Chiyu has returned after recovering from his injuries. If it wasn't for his command, these fellows wouldn't have dared to attack after suffering so many setbacks. The situation isn't looking good. We've used up most of the ammunition we brought in the previous battle. It seems like we can only rely on our strength for this battle. Ming Ming, quickly inform everyone to prepare for battle." Ming Ming acknowledged her words and drifted away. Ryue stared at the approaching Jili people army as she looked forward to his return. "Chiyu, if you were here, I wouldn't have to be so worried. When will you be back?" Ever since Chiyu became the king of the Zodiac, Ryue had given up her position as the #1 warrior of the Zodiac to him. She had already gotten used to the days when Chiyu was around. As long as Chiyu was around, the Zodiac warriors would have a backbone in any battle. However, Chiyu wasn't around. Ryue could only support the Zodiac warriors on her own. Seeing the Jili people launching an all-out attack and Chiyu who might be hiding in the dark, Ryue felt a little embarrassed. Ryue was working hard to fight against the Jili people. What about Chiyu? He was currently in Tibet. In other words, He was still in the wonderful space of the Five Elements mountain. Even Chi-Yu didn't know how much time had passed. Ever since he came here, other than a few times when he needed to cultivate the thundercloud force to stay awake, his spiritual power was almost always in a deep sleep. In this space, he didn't need to worry about any possible attacks at all. He could completely focus on cultivating. It was also under such circumstances that Chi-Yu fully experienced the benefits of the Five Elements mountain. It was just as he expected. On the blue mountain peak in the north, there was an incomparably surging water attribute energy. It didn't take long. His water thundercloud force, which had reached the 8 clouds level, had completely stabilized after absorbing the huge amount of water attribute energy. After that, Chi-Yu moved to the red mountain peak in the south. Not long ago, with the abundant fire attribute energy here, he had reached the 8 clouds level after wholeheartedly cultivating 4 types of thundercloud force. 2 of them had reached the 8 clouds level, which meant that he had completed half of his 8 clouds cultivation. His strength had also greatly increased. At the same time, after completing the fire attribute cloud energy training, Chi-Yu discovered that when he arrived at the earth attribute yellow mountain peak in the center, the energy formed from the 5 elements would produce an extremely gentle aura. This aura was actually complementary to his own natural energy. Thus, in the following period of time, Chi-Yu's body began to emit a gentle aura. Chi-Yu absorbed this aura to strengthen his origin of nature. His body had also evolved again in the 5 Elements mountain. Although it wasn't as good as the rebirth of the origin of nature, his body was already very tough. It was extremely difficult to evolve again. In the process of constantly absorbing energy, his meridians were now able to withstand more and more energy fluctuations. Taking a deep breath, Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a trace of satisfaction. In this space, there was no real air. If ordinary people came to this space, they wouldn't even be able to survive at all. This was because this space was completely filled with the surging energy of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The 5 energy elements reinforced and restrained each other. In different directions, the energy one breathed would also be different. It was a pity that only 2 of Chi-Yu's 4 types of thundercloud force were compatible with the 5 elements. Otherwise, he could even improve his strength in a short period of time. The origin of nature energy in his body had become more peaceful and compatible with his own energy. Chi-Yu stood up and glanced at the quiet surroundings. He suddenly felt a little anxious. He had been in Tibet for some time, and he didn't know what the situation was like during the era of the ancient beasts. Without Chi-Yu, it would not be a problem for the Zodiac army to help the human army resist the enemy's attack. However, once Chi-Yu recovered from his injuries and reappeared in the camp of the Jili people, everything would be hard to say. After all, he had the extremely terrifying Pangu axe in his hand. From Master Zagru's description of the Xianyuan sword, Pangu axe and Haotian pagoda should also be a pair. If only Pangu axe was present, it would be better. However, Chi-Yu was afraid that Chi-Yu would also discover the mystery of the 10 great artifacts. If he used Pangu axe to obtain Haotian pagoda, then the calamity of the ancient beasts would really arrive. At the thought of the uncertain factors over there, Chi-Yu was very anxious to leave this place. He wanted to return to the era of the ancient beasts as soon as possible. However, the Kongtong seal was too attractive to him. It was a divine artifact that could greatly improve his ability. Therefore, no matter how anxious he was, he could only wait for now. Just as Chi-Yu was preparing to continue his cultivation, a comfortable voice suddenly rang out in his heart. What a comfortable aura. This is the aura of an old friend. Chi-Yu, how did you get here? Upon hearing this voice, Chi-Yu could not help but be overjoyed. He hurriedly said, Senior Xianyuan Soul, you're awake? How is your energy recovery? That's right, the voice that had suddenly appeared belonged to Xianyuan Soul. Xianyuan Soul smiled and said, Don't worry. As long as the Xianyuan sword still exists, I will not disappear. However, I did not expect the god-killing formation to consume so much energy. If you had not come to this place, I'm afraid it would have taken a long time for me to wake up. Your energy seems to have become much stronger than before. Tell me what happened while I was unconscious. Chi-Yu agreed and hurriedly told him everything that had happened after he had returned from London. After listening to Chi-Yu's words, Xianyuan's soul could not help but angrily say, "These despicable people from the West really deserve to die. Damn it, the next time we go, we must get rid of them." However, I did not expect Chi-Yu to be able to obtain Panga's axe. Letting this guy obtain such a powerful divine weapon will indeed have a great impact on the era of the ancient beasts. The little monk was right on this point. I'm afraid only I can restrain Panga's axe. Chi-Yu, when we reach the era of the ancient beasts, we must try our best to attack Chi-Yu and get rid of him before he completely grasps the method of using Panga's axe. Alright, let's not talk nonsense. Let's go, I'll bring you to meet my old friend. The 5 elements energy here can be said to be a great tonic for me. No wonder it feels so comfortable. With a flash of golden light, the Xianyuan sword appeared in front of Chi-Yu out of thin air. Compared to when he used the Xianyuan sword alone a few days ago, the light on the sword's body had become much more lively. After all, only when the Xianyuan sword had a soul could it be considered a truly powerful divine weapon. The light on the Xianyuan sword shone brightly. Xianyuan's soul let out a long roar. Chi-Yu only felt that his whole body had become light. His body had been wrapped in the golden light released by the Xianyuan sword. Then, with a flash of golden light, the Xianyuan soul controlled the Xianyuan sword. Carrying Chi-Yu's body, it directly went down the 5 elements mountain. The direction in which he flew was under the yellow mountain in the center. Chi-Yu had also used his own spiritual force to explore this space, but at that time, he did not find anything. But at this time, the sudden change surprised Chi-Yu. When the golden light on the Xianyuan sword touched the yellow mountain, the entire 5 elements mountain shook violently, and the 5 mountain peaks began to change to a certain extent. 5 colored mountain rocks rolled down, and the huge energy began to tremble. In the flashing light, the yellow mountain that was originally in the center began to move, while the other 4 mountains began to converge towards one position, leaving an empty space in the original position of the 4 mountains, just enough for the yellow mountain to squeeze in, causing the 5 mountains to form a circle, forming the shape of a 5-pointed star. 5 colors flashed, and the energy of the 5 elements seemed to become more intense after the 5 mountains moved closer. A loud and clear dragon roar sounded from the center of the yellow mountain. Then, 5 rays of light rose into the sky, floating in the blink of an eye. Chi-Yu clearly saw that they were 5 giant dragons, about 30 meters long. They were completely in the shape of the legendary giant dragons. They had no dragon wings, and their whole bodies were covered with thick scales. They had 2 horns on their heads, and their 5 giant claws were waving. As their bodies twisted, they constantly released a huge light. Just like the surrounding 5 mountains, as soon as they appeared, they arranged themselves into a pentagram, and their bodies stuck to each other, floating in the air. Xuanyuan's voice sounded in Chi-Yu's mind. Do you see that? These are the 5 elements undying divine dragons, and also the eternal guardians of the Kongtong seal. As long as the Kongtong seal is still there, they will never die. They are very powerful and not something that those ancient giant beasts you know of can compare to. The strength of each undying divine dragon is not inferior to that little bird you recently took in. Moreover, with their undying attribute, they are even more powerful. In fact, even without Xuanyuan's words, Chi-Yu had already felt the strong energy fluctuations from the undying divine dragons. If such a tyrannical giant dragon could help him in all aspects, then his strength would increase even if he didn't want to. Under the effect of the 5 elements, if the 5 undying divine dragons joined forces to attack, the power would certainly be increased. As for how strong they would be, it was not something that Chi Yu could know for now. After the 5 elements, giant dragons appeared. As if they did not notice Xuan Yuan's sword, they just hovered in the air in the shape of a pentagram. At this moment, a loud rumble came from the ground, and a huge stone pillar broke through the air at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it had risen to the height of the 5 elements, giant dragons. The stone pillar was also pentagonal, and each side was different in color. When gathered together, it emitted a huge energy aura. Right in the middle of the stone pillar, Chi Yu saw a lustrous luster. It was a piece of milky white jade, and the luster on its surface looked so gentle. Faint light flickered, and the 5 elements giant dragons cheered at the same time. They stopped hovering and raised their heads in 5 different directions. Chi Yu fixed his eyes on it. The jade in the middle was pentagonal, and each side was inlaid with a gem. According to the 5 elements, the 5 gems' colors were exactly the same as the 5 mountains from before. The light from the gems was not strong, and on each of the 5 sides, there was a human figure carved. Although it looked a little blurry, it was vivid and lifelike, as if it had a life of its own. Faint light flickered, and the light in Chi Yu's eyes also became stronger. He knew that this must be the legendary Kongtong seal. The Kongtong seal, ranked 8th among the 10 great divine weapons, and it could be paired with Xuan Yuan's sword. Xuan Yuan's sword let out a sharp whistle, and a sharp golden light pierced through the air, illuminating the entire space above the 5 elements mountain. The light that was filled with benevolent aura shone on the jade, and suddenly, the Kongtong seal changed. 5 immortal dragons with 5 different colors of light simultaneously merged into it, and the 5 gems on the 5 sides of the Kongtong seal immediately lit up. Then, the 5 colored dragons appeared, coiling around the statue, and turned into 5 small dragons. Xuan Yuan's soul laughed loudly. "Old friend, you've slept long enough, it's time to wake up." A clear voice came from the Kongtong seal. "I was wondering who was so arrogant, so it's this broken sword of yours. It looks like you're not doing very well, and your energy is not as abundant as before." Xuan Yuan's soul said in a bad mood, "Nonsense, do you think you can compare to before? Don't forget, we were in the hands of Goddess Nuwa at that time. Goddess Nuwa's energy was so strong, and now she's gone. Without her, do you think you can exert your full strength?" A light flashed, and a wisp of white smoke floated out of the Kongtong seal. The smoke circled around, and a middle-aged man who looked about 30 years old appeared out of thin air above the Kongtong seal. Faint light flickered, and he looked up at Xuan Yuan's sword in the air and said, "Speak, why did you wake me up?" Xuan Yuan's soul said in a bad mood, "Why? Didn't I wake you up to ask you to help my current master? We've been separated for too long, and it's time for us to cooperate. You should know that Panga's axe has also appeared. Come, Chi Yu, let me introduce you, this is the seal spirit of the Kongtong seal.